Chapter 2391. Secondly, all the 10,000 saints' real spirits must be completely destroyed from this world. Thirdly, revenge must be taken for my family. Fourthly, and most importantly, my brothers must not die in vain. Fifthly, I need your help, and you should also need my help. If you do it alone, I may be able to protect myself, but you can't do it now. Also, as long as it's Cloud Master's plan, I must destroy it. Shui Leihan said lightly, "Tell me the details of the ascension of the Jade Flower Emperor." I don't dare to say anything else, but after so many years, I still know a little about Cloud Master's methods of doing things. For the time being, make preparations. When the other heavenly emperors arrive, don't act rashly. These secrets can't be revealed by your mouths. This kind of shocking information must be revealed by someone with enough power to ensure that nothing goes wrong. Shui Leihan stood up. I know what I'm doing. After a discussion, Shui Leihan and Chu Yang left immediately, as if they had never been here. The surroundings returned to silence once more. Very few people knew that this conversation between the East Royal Heavenly Emperor and the Tribulation Swordmaster was of great significance and far-reaching influence. Many things in the future would start because of this conversation today. Even the entire structure of the Heaven Imperial Court would change completely because of this conversation. Looking at Shui Leihan's back, Chu Yang couldn't help but admire the methods of this good friend of his in the past. Such anger, such a big temper, such an aura, he could actually hide it to an invisible extent. Cloud Master had obviously been observing the big and small matters of the Heaven Imperial City from the sky above Ink Cloud Sky, but he didn't notice any trace of Donghuang Shui Leihan's arrival or departure. Just from this point, one could see how terrifying Shui Leihan was. That night, Xie Dan Qiong quietly left the Imperial Palace and arrived at this small courtyard. He didn't have the majesty of an emperor and started drinking, chatting, and fooling around with some idlers. This continued for a long time until dawn. Seeing this scene, someone in the sky simply snorted. Such trash actually wanted to climb to the position of a heavenly emperor. What wishful thinking! After sending off his brothers, Chu Yang returned to his room and saw a person sitting on a chair. Shui Leihan. Oh no. Shui Leihan said indifferently, although this great Emperor Jasper Flower has already begun to bear the black cloud heaven's providence, his foundation is simply too weak. He's only at the peak of the saint level. With his bone age, it was already very rare for him to have such a cultivation base. However, his cultivation base was still insufficient. If he really faced a thunderous attack from Guru Yun, he would definitely not be able to withstand it. In fact, his life might be in danger. Actually, there's no need for Master Yun to personally take action. Even if the assailant was just one of Master Yun's subordinates, Xie Dan Qiong's foundation wouldn't be able to withstand it. Shui Leihan said, "The plan that you guys set up was very thorough. I thought that the other preparations were already foolproof. The only flaw is here." At this point, Shui Leihan heaved a long sigh of relief and said, "I have to say that your sworn brother Mo Tianji is really a genius at strategizing. Throughout my long life, there are only 2 or 3 people who can be compared to him at most. However, if we can't solve this flaw of Xie Dan Qiong, all the arrangements will be meaningless." Chu Yang nodded. Tianji's arrangements are naturally indisputable. The weakness of Dan Qiong's weak cultivation base is really difficult to make up for. Based on the current situation, we can only follow the original plan and hope that Xie Dan Qiong can withstand it. I've prepared 2 more extremely powerful heavy pills for him. As long as Dan Qiong is still breathing after the first wave of attack, there won't be a problem. Shui Leihan shook his head. We're still too passive. An expert sniper can kill in 1 shot. It's very difficult for Xie Dan Qiong to withstand that attack. Chu Yang's expression changed slightly. But we're already in a precarious situation. We have no choice. Other than that, what else can we do? Shui Leihan said indifferently, or we can use the trick of substituting one for another. Substituting one for another? Chu Yang was deep in thought. Substituting one for another means that I'll take on Xie Dan Qiong's appearance when the time comes and accept the challenge. With your current cultivation, no matter who impersonates Xie Dan Qiong, it'll be a dead end. But I'm different. I have 100% confidence in it. Shui Leihan's eyes were filled with murderous intent. No matter who comes, I'll bury him on the stage. I'll definitely ruin Master Yun's plan. Chu Yang's spirits were lifted and his eyes lit up. He said, if you impersonate Xie Dan Qiong, there'll naturally be no problem. There'll definitely be no need to worry about anyone seeing through the flaws. But what about the Eastern Royal Heavens? And how are we going to deal with Xie Dan Qiong's unique martial arts? Once you counterattack, won't it be equivalent to revealing your identity? There are so many top-notch experts around and they're all your old acquaintances. There's definitely no way you can hide it from their eyes, right? Shui Leihan said indifferently, this isn't difficult to solve. As long as you think it's feasible, my seventh brother can impersonate me in the Eastern Royal Heavens. As long as he doesn't fight with experts of the same level, there won't be any flaws. As for Xie Dan Qiong's viburnum flower, give me a day of training and I'll probably be able to make it bloom. Chu Yang nodded slowly. Regarding this matter, I'll still have to discuss it with Emo Tianji and Xie Dan Qiong to ensure that it's done perfectly. Shui Leihan nodded. I understand. Of course, Shui Leihan understood. Now was the biggest day of Xie Dan Qiong's life. He should be the one to bear the glory and favor of the world. Although he had no choice but to let Shui Leihan take his place to ensure that nothing goes wrong, it still lacked a special meaning. Brilliant plan. After hearing Chu Yang's description, Emo Tianji slapped the table and stood up, cheering loudly in excitement. Speaking of which, this matter had always been Emo Tianji's biggest headache. But now that Shui Leihan took the initiative to bring it up, it was truly a great help. It helped Emo Tianji solve his biggest headache. Dan Qiong, don't you have any other thoughts? Chu Yang asked Xie Dan Qiong, who was sitting at the side. Xie Dan Qiong's handsome face was filled with unconcealable regret. He said, my cultivation isn't high enough. What else can I say? Dong Huang is already giving me a lot of face by lowering his status. Although it's a pity, I'm willing to accept this arrangement. After all, the most important thing now is to complete the plan. But I have another request. What request? Emo Tianji asked. This time, it should be my crisis, but Dong Huang took it for me. Next time, if something happens to Dong Huang, I want to take his place. Xie Dan Qiong said seriously, when the time comes, no matter what the situation is, you can't stop me. Dong Huang also needs to promise me in advance. If it doesn't work, I'd rather fight on the Heaven Zen platform. So what if my soul and spirit are destroyed? Chu Yang and Emo Tianji looked at each other. Psychologically, both of them could understand Xie Dan Qiong's thoughts. With Xie Dan Qiong's natural pride, he definitely wouldn't take Dong Huang's place just to receive the cheers of the world. The so-called taking Dong Huang's place was, in fact, taking a calamity for Dong Huang. Putting aside whether Shui Leihan would encounter such a calamity in the future, there was only one point. If Shui Leihan really encountered a calamity that he couldn't safely survive with his cultivation level, with Xie Dan Qiong stepping in, it would naturally be even more impossible for him to survive. Only death awaited. If this exchange was made, it would be equivalent to Shui Leihan helping Xie Dan Qiong once, but Xie Dan Qiong had to pay with his life. But if he didn't agree to Xie Dan Qiong's request, Xie Dan Qiong definitely wouldn't agree to this matter now. To let someone else take his place to take the calamity, even if there was a 10% chance of success, it would still be a huge favor. Xie Dan Qiong really didn't want to owe this favor. Xie Dan Qiong's face was full of determination. Chu Yang and Emo Tianji couldn't do anything about this. In the end, Chu Yang could only look for Shui Leihan to discuss this matter. Unexpectedly, after Shui Leihan heard Xie Dan Qiong's request, he wasn't unhappy. Instead, he laughed loudly. You're really gutsy. This is the descendant of D. Good. I'll promise the Jade Flower Great Emperor that when the time comes, as long as there's a crisis that I can't handle, I'll definitely let him help me at least once. At this point, Chu Yang was finally relieved. When Shui Leihan said this, he actually didn't think that he would encounter any calamity that would definitely kill him. Yes, with his cultivation, even if the saint led the emperor and the empress to attack him at the same time, he could still escape if he couldn't defeat them. Even if he really encountered such a crisis, with Xie Danqiong's insignificant cultivation, what could he do? However, perhaps even Shui Leihan himself wouldn't have thought that the affairs of the world were unpredictable and unpredictable. In the near future, he actually really encountered such a calamity. If it weren't for Xie Danqiong risking his life to save him, Shui Leihan might really die before his ambitions were realized, but that was all in the future. All the arrangements and plans were carried out in full swing. On the 10th day, snowflakes suddenly fluttered in the sky. Right now, it was already very close to summer. The weather was naturally getting warmer. But even under such weather and climate, the sky was still clear and bright with white clouds. In the next instant, the white clouds in the sky gradually formed the shapes of lotuses. On the ends of the countless white lotuses and white clouds, countless snowflakes suddenly drifted down. Although it was snowing heavily, covering the sky and the sun, the falling snowflakes didn't give people the unpleasant feeling of the cold and bone-piercing wind blowing in the dark winter. Instead, it gave people a comfortable surprise. It was a very comfortable and joyful feeling. Like the spring breeze caressing one's face, there was only peace and tranquility. Right in this snow-covered place, the demon empress the demon emperor Sky's master, arrived at dark cloud sky. Chapter 2392. In the eyes of the world, Yao Exi was the first to come to Jianghu city after emperor. She was 5 days earlier than the official day of the ceremony. This was undoubtedly a matter of pride for Mo Yuntian and the new lord of Mo Yuntian, Xie Danqiong. But no one knew that before Yao Exi, the lord of Eastern Royal Sky, Donghuang Shui Leihan, had already been hiding here. No one knew that only sage Yun Shangren had also come to Mo Yuntian and had been hiding here for quite some time. After an unusually grand welcoming ceremony, the demon empress stayed in the Star Palace, which was specially used to receive the highest level of guests. On the day the demon empress moved in, she called Yao Ningning over without saying a word and taught him a harsh lesson. Yao Ningning came out of her mother's room with a face full of dust and dirt. She wanted to cry but had no tears. Just now, when the demon empress checked on the progress of a certain great master's cultivation, she found that not only did he not improve, but he also regressed. How could she be nice to him? The demon empress flew into a rage and immediately ordered the demon emperor Sky's 7 stars guard to personally supervise the great master's cultivation. She also gave him the sword of authority, a whip. If he was disobedient, he would be whipped. Even if he was beaten to death, it would be meritorious. Thus, a certain great-grandfather's idle days were gone, never to return. That night, the demon empress did not attend the welcoming banquet. She only sent a representative to pay her respects while she stayed in the Star Palace to meditate. For this trip, the demon empress and her sister came at the same time. In the room, they naturally had to talk and discuss. Big sister, do you think the Qianghua Emperor's ascension ceremony this time will be very lively? The beautiful woman in white was obviously very excited and brought up this topic that she was very concerned about. That's for sure. Yao Xian'er's expression did not change. She said indifferently, Mo Yuntian needs a new Sky Emperor, but Emperor Yi and Empress may not accept a newcomer. Especially a junior. No matter if it's cultivation, age, resources, or power, they are all insufficient. There's also His Majesty Saint. This time, Yuan Tian's limit was actually the incarnation of the heavenly demon. He will probably take action. The beautiful woman in white said. Saint? Yao Exen snorted and said, he's just a guy who gained fame by deceiving the world. He may be able to deceive others, but how can he deceive me? That guy looks like he's tolerant and magnanimous on the surface, but he's actually a petty person. It would be strange if he didn't take action this time. I heard Ninger and the others say that Chu Yang and his people have been preparing and guarding against them. As for who they're guarding against, it's easy to imagine. But this Jade Flower Emperor is still too young, and his cultivation is also. The beautiful woman in white was somewhat worried. To be honest, with his current cultivation, he can be considered a supreme expert even in the entire Heaven Imperial Court. But if he's really compared to experts like De Ho, he's still too far behind. He's even weaker than a 7 stars protector. If Saint Monarch is determined to slap him in the face this time, Chu Yang and the others won't be able to deal with him at all. They won't have the ability to keep him in check at all. Although this doesn't sound nice, it's the reality, she sighed and said, it's rare that this Jade Flower Emperor is so handsome. Why don't I personally help him this once? Yao Exen stared at her sister with great disdain and sighed. You're really hopeless. How can you dare to say anything? You're a love-struck fool. The beautiful woman in white chuckled. How am I a love-struck fool? Everyone loves beauty. A handsome man has always been an extremely rare and beautiful scenery in this world. I'm just purely appreciating it. A voice said, then have you ever appreciated me? The beautiful woman in white was shocked. She quickly turned around and asked, who's that? The demon empress also opened her eyes, somewhat surprised. But she still sat cross-legged and didn't move. The window opened without any wind, and a white figure flew in quietly. When the beautiful woman in white saw him float in, he was already pacing around the room with his hands behind his back. It's actually His Majesty East Sovereign? The beautiful woman in white was really shocked. Her heart actually skipped a beat. Oh my God, I've been teased by His Majesty East Sovereign, Shui Leihan chuckled but didn't say anything. Shui Leihan, why did you sneak in like this? The demon empress looked at Shui Leihan with obvious surprise. She said somewhat mockingly, are you used to being a thief that you've developed such a sneaky habit? Shui Leihan rubbed his nose and smiled bitterly, thinking to himself that he really couldn't offend women. Obviously, he had offended this demon empress because of the twin emperors last time, and she was still bearing a grudge. Her words were also laced with sarcasm, showing no mercy at all. Except, why is your temper still so bad? I really can't imagine how His Majesty Demon Emperor put up with it back then. Before Shui Leihan could finish his sentence, the demon empress was already angry. Shui Leihan, you dare to continue? Shui Leihan chuckled. I don't dare. Actually, I'm just expressing my sympathy for Brother Demon Emperor. Before he finished, a teacup had already been thrown over. The speed of the teacup was so fast and fierce that it didn't lose to any hidden weapon in the world. Shui Leihan laughed out loud. With a wave of his hand, he had already caught the teacup. You bastard, if you have something to say, then say it. If you have nothing to say, then get lost. The demon empress was as cold as ice, not giving Dong Huang any face at all. Shui Leihan couldn't help but laugh bitterly. I'm just a good man who doesn't fight with women. Her figure flashed, and the demon empress had already transformed into thousands of people in an instant. In this narrow space, she attacked Shui Leihan fiercely. Every move had the power to make gods and demons tremble, and fairies keep quiet. Bang, bang, bang. In the blink of an eye, Shui Leihan had already endured thousands of punches and kicks from the demon empress, but he still didn't panic. In a flash, the demon empress stood in front of him, her gaze cold. Shui Leihan, you've actually broken through? Shui Leihan sighed. I'm ashamed, I've only broken through halfway. Yao Exen was a little stunned. She exhaled and said, even if it's just half a step, it's already not bad. As she spoke, she returned to her seat and sat down. She said lightly, my current cultivation is more or less on par with yours, but my realm is half a step behind you. There's no need to fight anymore. Shui Leihan said lightly, this half a step, actually, you've already taken it a long time ago. It's just that the step hasn't been that big yet. The demon empress snorted. Your eyes are really sharp. I've taken the liberty to look for you this time because there's really a big matter. Shui Leihan became serious. A big matter that concerns our life and death, and concerns the safety of the Heaven Imperial Court. Concerns our life and death. The demon empress sneered disdainfully. She didn't hide the distrust in her tone at all. But when she saw Shui Leihan's serious face, she couldn't help but become serious as well. After a moment of silence, she asked softly, what exactly is it? Shui Leihan said lightly, Although Yuan Tianji is already dead, he still left behind a handwritten letter, which records, "The demon empress cut him off." What does Yuan Tianji's handwritten letter have to do with me? What's the big deal about a dead person's belongings? The affairs of the world are mysterious and unpredictable. That letter really has a lot to do with you. Shui Leihan smiled and said in a low voice, "It contains the truth behind His Majesty the Demon Emperor being besieged back then." What? Where's the handwritten letter now? The Demon Empress stood up with a swoosh. At this moment, the Demon Empress expression was horrifying, very horrifying. That incident back then had always been a knot in her heart. But now, it was mentioned by Shui Leihan. Don't be agitated. Sit down and let's talk slowly. Shui Leihan sighed. There are many things in this that I was even more shocked than you when I found out. The Demon Empress sat down slowly. She said softly, but word by word, "Are you going to tell me if this has anything to do with Cloud Lord?" Shui Leihan was stunned. He raised his head and said, "You suspect Cloud Lord? How long have you suspected him?" "It's been a very, very long time. It's just that I don't have any evidence." The Demon Empress said coldly, "Am I right?" "Yes, I didn't expect you to be the one with a clear mind." Shui Leihan smiled bitterly. Just from this point alone, the Demon Empress was indeed much better than him. But he had never suspected that the person who killed his father was Cloud Lord. "Let me see that handwritten letter. I want to know everything." The Demon Empress took a deep breath and stretched out her hand. "After you read it, don't be agitated. Being anxious will only spoil things." Shui Leihan said, "But there's one more thing that I want to tell you in advance." "Speak." The Demon Empress' voice was cold. 10,000 saints' true spirit reappear in the world," Shui Leihan said with a heavy voice. The Demon Empress' face instantly darkened. The beautiful woman in white also left tactfully. That night, the Star Palace where the Demon Empress was staying was filled with indescribable depression, violence, and almost crazy emotions. No one knew what the Demon Empress and Dong Huang talked about that night. Another day passed just like that. The Eastern Royal Heavens Emperor Dong Huang's carriage finally arrived at Ink Cloud Heavens Jianghu City. In the afternoon, the Daluo Heavens Celestial Emperor Zi Wuji and the Buddha Heavens Celestial Emperor Mo Huichin arrived at the same time. Ink Cloud Heaven once again went into a frenzy. On the third last day, it was almost as if they had made an appointment. Extreme Heaven Merciless Heavenly Emperor Zui Wuqing, Great Western Heaven Mad Sword Heavenly Emperor Wu Yaquang, Green Heaven Heavenly Emperor Wu Wei Mo Qingqing, South Pole Heavenly Emperor Ice Snow Meng Jinghui, and North Pole Heavenly Emperor Yenyang Long Inghuan all came together. The degree of excitement in Ink Cloud Sky was now close to the peak. In order to welcome the arrival of these supreme big shots, Ink Cloud Sky's Jianghu City opened all 4 gates and no longer set up any registration. Although it was only limited to these 3 days, these 3 days caused the population in the city to soar by 20%. It was this 20% increase in population that made Mo Tianji so worried that his hair almost turned white. Brother Jia also almost broke his legs from running around. However, the targets of the spies found here were not more than 200 people. Most of the people that harbored ill intent entered Jasper City safely, and they vanished within the boundless sea of people. Chapter 2393. On this day, the sun shone brightly, illuminating the entire world. Above dark cloud sky, there were many white clouds. The sun rose from the east and dyed the entire sky red. The white clouds turned into colorful clouds. At this moment, the sound of a bell suddenly rang out. The sound of the bell shook the entire universe. It was not just one bell, but a total of 10 large bronze bells. They rang at the same time from 10 different directions. They rang at the same time, making an extremely uniform sound. It was as if only one bell was rung. Just the first ring of the bell had already given everyone a strong feeling of shock, gaining the upper hand by a show of strength. Under the control of the experts, the bells from all directions gradually gathered towards the Heaven Zen altar. Then, the legendary bell of heaven and earth rang on the Heaven Zen altar. No one took the initiative to ring it. Instead, it was the ringing of the 10 large bronze bells that caused the bell of heaven and earth to resonate. At this moment, the sound of the bell was exceptionally loud. It resounded for thousands of miles. Everyone who heard the sound of the bell felt their minds suddenly clear up and their minds return to peace. It was as if they had experienced a spiritual cleansing at this moment. Just like the sound of a bell 81 times. After the 81 bell rings, the entire dark cloud sky suddenly fell into a sea of cheers and shouts. Countless people jumped and cheered. They were so excited that their faces turned red. Countless fresh flowers were wantonly scattered in the sky. The fragrance of the flowers filled the air. People sang and danced in the streets and alleys. At this moment, an unusually loud voice rang. Heaven Imperial Court, Dark Cloud Sky and Earth, Jade Flower Emperor's Ascension Ceremony begins now. Following the sentence, the main gate of Jade Flower Emperor Palace slowly opened. 2 groups of people walked out in 2 rows. Their armors were bright and even the sunlight seemed to lose its color. These 2 groups of people walked out of the palace in a single file. They did not panic at all and walked silently along the way. It was as if there was no end to them. They formed 2 neat and uniform torrents of steel. They formed a wide human wall between Jade Flower Emperor Palace and the Heaven Zen altar in the distance. The 2 human walls were like 2 indestructible dams that completely stopped the torrent of people coming from the south. If one were to pay attention, they would be able to see that there were at least hundreds of thousands of people in this group, and not a single one of them was not a first-rated warrior. The distance between the Jasper Flower Emperor Palace and the Heaven Zen platform was not short. However, they reached the end of the long journey in just a few minutes. When the 2 people in front of the wall of people reached the Heaven Zen platform, the entire group stopped at the same time. In the next moment, all the members of the 2 teams simultaneously moved towards the people closest to them. Facing the torrential flow of people on both sides, each of them was like an immovable pillar, not moving at all. In front of them was an endless sea of people, and behind them was the empty road. No one dared to break through the blockade at this moment. Jasper Flower Guards, move out. Split open the sky and pave the way. The voice from before reverberated in the sky once more, and it was filled with a dignified and solemn feeling. At the same time, a smear of red suddenly appeared from the palace. That smear of red gradually expanded on the ground. It was a red carpet, and it started to meander out from the direction of the palace. It was at least 10 feet wide, and it was completely compatible with the road that was separated by the 2 human walls. It followed the road behind the Jasper Flower Guards and extended all the way out. No one moved, but this red carpet extended forward on its own, as if there was no end at all. The entire world fell into silence because of the strange situation in front of them. All the eyes that could see this strange scene followed the red carpet and extended forward, extended, and extended again. It continued until the red carpet extended to the front of the Heaven Zen platform. When it came into contact with the bright yellow carpet of the road to heaven, it stopped abruptly. Stepping on the red carpet that carried the hopes and wishes of all the people of Black Cloud Sky, and stepping on the position of the Black Cloud Sky Emperor. That was what it meant. Under the gaze of everyone, the bells and drums in the palace rang again, and that solemn voice said loudly, "Your Majesty, please rise." Deafening cheers sounded. First, 100 yellow-clothed youths walked out from the left, and then 100 white-clothed youths walked out from the right. Everyone was full of energy and was in high spirits. Then, there were countless banners that surged out from the palace. Thousands of soldiers and horses followed along the 2 sides of the road and moved forward quietly. Then, a golden imperial carriage finally appeared. Black Cloud Sky 7-star guards, 3 in the front and 4 at the back, formed a formation of the Big Dipper and surrounded the imperial carriage. In front, 8 majestic dragon beasts pulled the reins and pulled the imperial carriage forward slowly. The sunlight peeked out from the clouds and shone down. There was only a sliver of sunlight, but it always shone on the imperial carriage. Wherever the imperial carriage went, the sunlight would shine there. On the imperial carriage, there was a white jade platform. On the platform, there were 2 chairs that were set up side by side. Heavenly Emperor Mo Yun, who was dressed in a bright yellow robe, sat calmly on a chair. That peerless face was calm at this moment, without any ripples. Handsome, confident, beautiful, steady, dignified, solemn, calm, graceful, elegant. At this moment, everyone felt that it seemed like it was not excessive to give all the praises in the world to the current Black Cloud Sky Emperor Jasper Flower Great Emperor. In fact, it was far from enough. There were some affectionate Black Cloud Sky young ladies who were emotional until they cried loudly. And on the chair on the right of Xie Danqiong sat a beautiful lady in a phoenix robe. Her face was dignified, and she was a peerless beauty. Accompanying Xie Danqiong to sit here, her face showed some excitement, but it was more of happiness and touching. Everyone noticed that the right hand of the Jasper Flower Great Emperor and the left hand of this peerless beauty who was a mother model of the world were holding tightly from start to finish. Our noble Black Cloud Sky Emperor. Our noble Black Cloud Sky Empress. That dignified and solemn voice sounded once again. At this moment, using these two sentences, it thoroughly ignited the entire Black Cloud Sky's shocking atmosphere. The cheers instantly shook the entire firmament. The person in the carriage is Heavenly Emperor Black Cloud Sky Emperor Jasper Flower Great Emperor's wife. Madame May is also our Black Cloud Sky's Empress May, Black Cloud Sky's only Empress, a mother model of the world, and a blessing to the common people. Her Majesty Jasper Flower and Empress May were married when they were young, and they have never left each other. On the good day of the Jasper Flower Great Emperor's ascension, she and Empress May will enjoy the glory of the world together. A loving couple is nothing more than this. The world bears witness, and everyone rejoices. That master of ceremonies' voice reverberated through the sky. Everyone cheered at this moment, practically shouting until their voices were hoarse. Countless youths looked at the handsome heavenly emperor and the beautiful empress, and they were all thinking in their hearts, "I wonder when I can do this? Or perhaps, if I were Heavenly Emperor Black Cloud, would I make such a decision?" Many young ladies screamed until they almost went crazy at this moment. Wasn't the scene in front of them the most dreamy scene of all the young ladies in the world? One day, they would ascend to the peak of the world hand in hand with their sweetheart, enjoying the cheers of the people side by side, facing the millions of people in the whole world, announcing their happiness and perfection, witnessing their love. This scene was the deepest dream. The most beautiful dream. That empress who was holding hands with the Jasper Flower Great Emperor at this moment was really blessed. Countless young ladies were so envious that their eyes turned red, and their hearts were broken from jealousy, but at the same time, their hearts were drunk with sweetness. Madame May and Xie Danqiong sat side by side, and the happiness in her heart at this moment was really almost overflowing. It was enough for her to have this moment in her life. No matter how many hardships she had to go through for this, no matter how long she had to go through separation, no matter how much she had to bear for this, it was really enough. This scene was the most beautiful moment of all the women in the world's dream. She held Xie Danqiong's hand tightly, and she could clearly feel that she was holding the happiness of a lifetime. Madame May's entire body and mind were filled with happiness, but she didn't know that Xie Danqiong was holding his wife's hand at this moment, and his heart was also filled with many emotions. Once upon a time, I once said that I would bring you to the peak of your life, and at the moment I reached the peak, I would share the glory with you. That was the promise I made to you on our wedding night. Do you still remember? I remember. I did it. I really did it. Fortunately, I have you by my side. When we were homeless and in dire straits, you didn't leave us. When we were separated from each other and missed each other for a long time, your thinness, your yearning, all your efforts. You have no regrets. Your persistence in everything. I know all of it and I remember all of it. So, all my glory and glory today belong to you. Everything that belongs to me belongs to you. Today is just the beginning, and in the future, there are long days that I want to spend with you, walk through side by side. In the future, there are even greater glories waiting for you in front. Because you are worth it. Everything that belongs to me, only you deserve to share it. Xie Danqiong felt the divine senses of the sage-level experts surrounding him. Although he knew that today was the most glorious day of his life, and that there was the danger of dying at every turn, Xie Danqiong knew that today was the most dangerous day of his life. It was very likely that before he could reach the peak of glory, he would fall into the boundless hell first. But at this moment, his heart was calm, and he only felt incomparably safe and peaceful. Because his brothers were all here. This chaotic divine will that blotted out the sky and covered the earth came from the tribulation energy of his brothers. Big Brother said before, "With my brothers by my side, I am invincible in the world." Xie Danqiong's face was calm and peaceful, and he sat steadily on the imperial chariot, moving forward slowly with the dragon beast pulling the chariot. At this moment, even if the sky falls, we can hold it up. The team moved forward slowly with the solemn music, and the sun shone brightly. They were getting closer and closer to the Heaven Zen platform. The cheers of the surrounding people were still louder and louder, and there was no sign of it slowing down. Chu Yang mixed in with the crowd, and moved forward slowly with the team. He slid through the dense crowd like a fish, and paid close attention to all the movements around him. Not only him, there was also Mo Tianji, Gu Duxing, Dong Wushang, GMO Rui Barong, Ao Xin, Mo Qingwu, Zi Xieching, Mo Lei, Brother Hu Wang Dao, and the rest of the assassins and guards, and even the divine soul of the tribulation, and Tan Tan, who just came out of seclusion last night. It was the first time everyone worked together, and the first time they went all out. Chapter 2394. The Great Demon King had unexpectedly made it to this grand festival. It was just that no one knew what level the Great Demon King had reached after his reappearance. Even Chu Yang didn't have the time to ask Tan Tan what level he was at. Because the first thing Tan Tan said after he came out of seclusion was to make his brothers run away in embarrassment. "Hey, tell me, did I become more handsome after my seclusion?" Great Demon King Tan held the mirror and was very pleased with himself. The group of brothers instantly scattered like flowing stars and scattered clouds. Another person who shouldn't have come didn't come. No, a demon didn't come. A certain demon, Ning Ning, cried and shouted that he wanted to come and participate in the festival, but after being beaten up by the furious demon empress, he was still recuperating in Star Palace. Today's event was too dangerous, so he, who was too weak and had a special identity, decided to stay at a certain place. Everyone was extremely cautious, and they were on high alert. Everyone knew that something would happen today, but they couldn't let it happen. Once something happened, today's ascension ceremony would become a big joke in the entire Heaven Imperial Court. Faintly, a cold air came quickly. Chu Yang's expression didn't change, but he quickly locked onto his target. It was a dark-skinned man. His hand was hidden in his chest, and his eyes followed Xie Danqiong's carriage. His eyes were flickering. Chu Yang approached his target quietly. The next moment, Xie Danqiong's carriage finally arrived. The man's eyes lit up. He took out his right hand from his chest, and his feet were already off the ground. He was about to jump up, but he suddenly felt a chill on his back. Then, the man stood there and didn't move. Chu Yang silently pulled out the calamity sword from his back. He made a gesture, and two big men walked over from the crowd. Like old friends who hadn't seen each other for a long time, they hugged the man who couldn't move and walked out while talking and laughing. Actually, they carried him out. Because the man had already become a dead man whose soul had dispersed after Chu Yang attacked. The reason why he didn't fall was because Chu Yang used his strength skillfully. That was why he could support himself for a while. In such a noisy crowd, such a small movement couldn't attract anyone's attention at all. It was like a small bubble in the sea that popped. Although it didn't make any noise, it was too insignificant to be noticed. Chu Yang had already picked out more than a dozen people from the crowd. Mo Qingwu and the others were also doing the same. At this moment, he could no longer care about the whereabouts of the 10,000 saints' true spirit. He only wanted to kill the enemy as quickly as possible and prevent the destruction of the ceremony from occurring. That would be victory. What made Chu Yang feel a little relieved was that there were basically no special experts hidden in the crowd. Most of them were only saints, and the highest was only at the peak of celestial being. Chu Yang and the others cleaned up the place very quickly under this kind of premise. The difficulty wasn't high either. In fact, there was almost no difficulty. However, Chu Yang also understood another thing. These people had come to throw away their lives. It would have been better if they could have created a disturbance. But they would have contributed a wisp of their true spirit if they couldn't. For the mastermind behind the scenes, there would be gains whether they succeeded or not. On the other hand, there was a certain degree of paralysis. One or two of them might not be able to lower Chu Yang and the others' vigilance, but what about 8 or 10 of them, more than 10, more than 100 of them? After coming into contact with so many targets whose strength was insufficient, if they weren't mentally prepared, they would more or less feel a little tired. If Chu Yang and the others mistakenly thought that this was the extent of the enemy's strength, then when the real thunderous attack came, they would definitely be unable to deal with it. Fortunately, Chu Yang had already sent a telepathic message at the first moment. Everyone, don't be careless. The brothers nodded in agreement. Everyone was already well aware of this point. Even if Chu Yang didn't remind them, they wouldn't be careless. After all, they had dealt with too many 10,000 saints' true spirit hosts before. How could they not have lingering fears? Although the journey wasn't short, with the speed of the dragon beasts, the entire journey didn't take long. However, the brothers who were responsible for guarding the journey felt as if a few months had passed. They were almost mentally and physically exhausted. However, they still had to force themselves to stay alert and pay attention to any traces so that they wouldn't miss anything. To be honest, they weren't tired. The amount of exercise couldn't even be considered a warm-up. However, the huge psychological pressure of being cautious and being afraid of making any mistakes was really unbearable. At the same time, it was also the main reason why they were mentally and physically exhausted. Now that the Heaven Zen platform was right in front of them, the enemy's official time of action was probably here. Everyone finally heaved a sigh of relief. The unknown pressure before the incident was even heavier than the pressure that they had to face in real life. The group moved forward slowly. Chu Yang realized that Emo Tianji had unknowingly come to his side. Although Emo Tianji's face was also a little tired, it was more of a gratified look. "How is it, Tianji?" Chu Yang asked with a smile. "Dan Xiong is really good, as expected of our brother, especially as a man." It was obvious that Emo Tianji was in a very good mood. Chu Yang was startled when he heard that. Then he understood immediately. "You're talking about Madame Mei?" "Yes, what else could it be?" Emo Tianji sighed and said, "In this world it's easy to go through thick and thin together, but difficult to go through thick and thin together. How many men, before they succeeded, their wives supported them and never left them. They gritted their teeth and endured through the difficulties together. However, after they succeeded, they left their wives behind and looked for new ones. It's indeed not easy for Xie Danxiong to choose to let sister-in-law and sister-in-law bear witness to his success. He's indeed a good man." Emo Tianji wasn't stingy with his compliments. Chu Yang remained silent for a long time before he sighed and said, "That's right. I still remember that time in Iron Cloud, after a victory in a war, the generals brought their wives to attend the banquet that Butian had set up to celebrate his victory. There were so many beautiful women at the banquet, and so many young ladies were gathered there. It was a riot of colors. There were many young and beautiful girls at the banquet. When they saw that the generals were all valiant and handsome, but they were all carrying middle-aged women, many of them began to criticize. They said, 'Why are the wives of these heroes so ugly? Only beautiful women like me deserve to be the wives of generals.' When Chu Yang said this, Emo Tianji laughed, 'Childish. They're just ignorant women who grew up in big houses. How can it be easy to be the wife of a general? Let's not talk about how much suffering they've endured. How much suffering have they gone through? What do those silly little girls know? A beautiful vase is beautiful, but how can it be of great use?' Chu Yang nodded, 'Indeed.' Then he said, 'However, people's way of thinking has indeed changed. Tianji, think about it. As a man, treating his first wife well is a natural thing. It is also a matter of course for him to share glory and splendor with her. However, I don't know since when did people start praising not abandoning his first wife and not having an affair as a virtue? That's something that should be done. Now, it's a standard to be praised. What else can I say about the fickleness of the world? Mo Tianji was silent for a long time. It was as if he didn't know how to answer. After a long time, when Chu Yang thought that Mo Tianji had given up on this question, Mo Tianji said softly, "Materialism is rampant. Sincerity is blinded. There are more and more heartless people, and fewer people who are true to their nature. Morality doesn't become their morality, and honor doesn't become their honor. Everyone forgets about righteousness and only cares about profit. Most young women don't have a foundation and they don't have money, but they love vanity and want to reach the heavens in a single step. Most of the successful people are middle-aged, and they think about sex when they're full and warm. One has money, and the other has beauty and youth. Therefore, the adulterer and the wife hit it off." Mo Tianji heaved a long sigh. How can one be pure and innocent in this world? Everyone knows the truth, but how many people can truly restrain themselves? How can one be pure and innocent if one's heart is clear, but one's actions are impure? Chu Yang was also silent. How can one be pure and innocent in this world? Chu Yang believed that this might be a problem that could never be solved. This kind of thing was repeated every moment in the world. How can one be pure and innocent if one's heart is clear, but one's actions are impure? No matter how high one's cultivation was or how powerful one was, for example, the almighty person who created the calamity sword would probably be powerless when faced with this problem. However, those who had sacrificed, those who had been abandoned after going through thick and thin with him, did they deserve to suffer such pain? Regarding this problem, even the intelligent Mo Tianji could only sigh. As long as they find the right person, and find a good man. Chu Yang smiled coldly. Are you saying that if they're abandoned, they can only blame themselves for being blind? Mo Tianji was stunned. But he immediately understood that this issue couldn't be resolved no matter how much they argued. So, he said, I won't argue with you about this issue. I only hope that we brothers can be like Xie Danqiong and have a clear conscience. Regarding this topic, Chu Yang actually felt a little guilty. So, he simply changed the topic and talked about another matter. So, he mischievously laughed. You don't need to feel guilty. You may have a lot of close female friends, but each of them is a married woman. I won't beat you as long as you don't treat Jianghu unfairly. So, I won't beat you up. But, I won't beat you as long as you don't treat Jianghu unfairly. You can rest assured now. Chapter 2395. Mo Tianji was full of confidence. You can try. Chu Yang was instantly dejected. But Mo Tianji definitely couldn't win against him, but his endless schemes were enough to make his life difficult. As the two of them were talking, they heard a wave of cheers. It was as if the entire palace was boiling. They had reached the Heaven Zen platform. Mu Tsanglan, who was in charge of the ceremony, could not help but exclaim in excitement, Our great Mo Yuntian Jasper Flower Emperor has arrived at the Heaven Zen platform. Right now, he's in front of the heavenly stairway. Let us cheer with all our hearts to celebrate Mo Yuntian Jade Flower Emperor walking past the heavenly stairway. The thunderous cheers reached another level. Xie Danqiong's body gently floated up. Then, he and Madame Mei slowly landed on the bright yellow carpet of the stairway like two light clouds. He raised his head and looked in front. Then, the sound of musical instruments echoed. Xie Danqiong stepped onto the heavenly stairway. There was no surprise or joy. His face was calm. The couple walked on the path formed by the bright yellow carpet. They held hands and stood side by side. Their eyes were focused. Although there was a sea of people around them, they only had eyes for each other. They floated lightly on the clouds. Madame Mei's eyes were already watery. They had reached the first level of the heavenly stairway and were safe. The cheers were deafening. The atmosphere was unprecedentedly warm. Xie Danqiong didn't stop at all. He continued on the path to the second level with his wife. The man was handsome and confident, and the woman was an outstanding beauty. When the husband and wife stood together, they were a perfect match, and their style was peerless. Along the way, the cheers resounded through the clouds. About 10 feet behind him, thousands of officials from Mo Yuntian Martial Emperor stood on the left and the Martial Emperor on the right. They guarded the Jade Flower Emperor and his wife as they walked forward. Along the way, there were traces of space tears constantly appearing all around them. The onlookers only thought that this was an auspicious sign from the heavens, but they did not know that in these space black holes, many masters had already been silently turned into dust under the gazes of tens of thousands of people. On the 8th floor, De and the other celestial emperors were all there. They all had their hands clasped behind their backs. They all looked serious. No one knew if they were looking forward to it or if they had other thoughts. Donghuang Shui Leihan stood expressionlessly with her hands clasped behind her back, completely ignoring everyone else. He was the closest to the Demon Empress, but they didn't speak to each other as if they were strangers. When the Demon Empress saw Xie Danqiong walking up the stairs, she couldn't help but sigh. She opened her mouth and praised, "This Xie Danqiong is the Empress of D." Even though his experience is still shallow and his cultivation is rather lacking, but this peerless demeanor can be said to be the most handsome man in the Empress of D. It's really eye-catching. The everlasting celestial emperor of the absolute overarching heaven, Zi Wuji, frowned and said unhappily, "I'm afraid the Demon Empress words are a little inappropriate. Is he the most handsome man? Then, where does the Demon Empress place this emperor?" The Demon Empress' mouth twitched subconsciously. Just as she was about to speak, she heard the Buddha's celestial emperor, Huichin, say, "Old Zi's words are both correct and incorrect. That Xie Danqiong is certainly not the most handsome man, but neither is Old Zi. Could it be that you don't see this emperor here? You're really arrogant." On the other side, the short Western Heavens Mad Sword celestial emperor, Wu Yequang, who looked like an abstract person, said, No, what you all said is wrong. The most handsome man is already here. What do you all think of me by speaking like this?" When the Western Heaven Emperor, Wu Yequang, said these words, the whole place fell silent. After a moment, everyone except Shui Leihan roared with laughter at the same time. Looking at Wu Yequang's short stature, his different facial features, and his strange posture of, "I'm a handsome man," everyone laughed until they couldn't straighten their backs again. After the Demon Empress smiled, she reprimanded, "A guy like you who doesn't look like a human and looks like a ghost actually has the face to call himself the most handsome man in the Empress of D? You're really boasting shamelessly." Wu Yequang stroked his hedgehog-like beard, still complacent. "I myself think that I'm quite handsome." The degree to which this person felt good about himself was obviously enough to compete with a certain demon king for supremacy. Sure enough, the universe was endless. There was actually such a weirdo in the world. But the Demon Empress really didn't want to waste her breath on this kind of trash, so she just spat. Sigh. Huichin sighed. "Too shameless." Zi Wuji rolled his eyes and looked at the sky. "I really can't watch anymore." Qing Zhao's heavenly emperor Wu Wei, Qing, turned to look at the void. Looking like this and still calling himself a handsome man, what kind of self-evaluation is this? It makes me feel so disgusted that I can't stand it anymore. Although De and Empress were not together all year round, once they were together, they were no different from ordinary people. Especially these people who had been in high positions for a long time, they almost didn't have any friends to brag about or joke with. After they reached their positions, they would probably only have this kind of ordinary performance when they were together with these people of the same level. Therefore, everyone still cherished this kind of opportunity very much. South Pole Sky Ice and Snow Heavenly Emperor Meng Jinghui frowned and said, "This person is indeed outstanding. Although his cultivation is shallow, it's only because he has cultivated for too short a time. In fact, in terms of age. And that's not right. I think there's something wrong with this." Just now, Her Majesty Demon Empress said that this Jade Flower Great Emperor is shallow and his cultivation is insufficient, but now it seems that this is not the case. "What do you mean?" The other heavenly emperors asked one after another. "You'd better look for yourselves. This Jade Flower Great Emperor, I can't see through his cultivation at all. Do you know what this means?" Meng Jinghui frowned. "Isn't this incredible?" Everyone couldn't help but be shocked when they heard this. They all focused their gazes on the Jade Flower Great Emperor, only to see a layer of brilliant light enveloping her body. Apart from her appearance and figure, everything related to her cultivation base and divine sense actually didn't leak out at all. Even with the powerful eyesight of the heavenly emperors and empress present, they couldn't see anything. This phenomenon meant that this jade flower great emperor before them wasn't weak at all. On the contrary, he was very strong. This phenomenon is somewhat similar to His Majesty's sunrise from the east. Meng Jinghui said thoughtfully. Everyone turned to look at Xue Leihan. Xue Leihan snorted. His face was as cold as ice. He stood with his hands behind his back and ignored them. Brother Xue, may I ask how you see this jade flower great emperor's foundation? Wu Yakuang asked. Boring. Xue Leihan snorted coldly and turned his face away. He actually ignored the maniac sword heavenly emperor's question and gave him a slap in the face in front of everyone. The heavenly emperors looked at each other. Their expressions were all rather interesting. Xue Leihan, what do you mean by this? Wu Yakuang was instantly enraged. He felt that he couldn't get out of this embarrassing situation. Xue Leihan looked up at the sky and said casually, I can't be bothered to talk to you. Wu Yakuang was instantly enraged. Are you looking for a fight? Xue Leihan twisted his neck and looked at Wu Yakuang contemptuously. Are you looking for a beating? If you don't mind, I'm very happy to do it. I've really been bored out of my mind recently. Everyone was taken aback. With the East Emperor's composure, it was really rare for him to say such provocative words. What exactly was going on today? Who cooked him? Why was he so angry? Cough. Looks like everyone has to be more careful. His Majesty the East Emperor is a little upset today. I've already eaten his head this morning. Let's all calm down. Yao Exen came forward to resolve the situation with a black face. She knew that this East Emperor in front of her wasn't the real one. The real East Emperor was already hiding in the dark to ensure that the ceremony was completed smoothly. But Demon Empress Exen was also a little speechless at this East Emperor in front of her. You can ask your seventh brother to impersonate him, but you should at least warn us beforehand, right? With such a fearless temper, is he here to congratulate someone or to pick a fight? If he's not careful, he'll be the first to cause a huge battle. She was depressed. Why does the East Emperor have such a precious younger brother? Isn't this too weird? Wu Yakuang sneered. I wonder what has made His Majesty the East Emperor upset? Why don't you tell me? I'm not talented, but I can still stand up for His Majesty the East Emperor. Dong Huang rolled his eyes and said, Tell you? Who do you think you are? What right do I have to tell you? Demon Empress Exen instantly felt a headache coming on. Could it be that this fellow felt upset because he couldn't fight? What did he mean? And what was his identity? Why did he speak as if he was taking his first breath after eating 300 tons of gunpowder? On the other side, Maniac Sword Heavenly Emperor was already so angry that he flew into a rage. Xue Leihan, you actually dare to look down on me? If it were someone else who said that, Wu Yakuang would probably just laugh and not take it to heart. His status and cultivation had already reached the point where there was no need to get angry over these words. But Dong Huang couldn't say that, because Dong Huang was the only one present who had the right to look down on him completely. No matter if it was identity, status, cultivation, or appearance, therefore, Maniac Sword Heavenly Emperor, who loved to look pretty, couldn't stand it. Yao Exen was extremely conflicted, but she still tried her best to persuade. Of course, the Demon Empress' persuasion wasn't purely to be a peacemaker. She raised her eyebrows. I say, what's the matter with the two of you? What's the situation? Today is ultimately the day of Heavenly Emperor Mo Yuntian's ascension. Why must the two of you create trouble? Whoever wants to create trouble will have to fight with me first. Wu Yakuang snorted heavily, and his square head immediately tilted to one side. No matter how bold he was, he didn't dare to provoke Dong Huang and Demon Empress at the same time. Dong Huang Xue Leihan also snorted and turned his head to the other side. Chapter 2396. In the dark, the real Dong Huang Xue Leihan was so angry that his stomach almost exploded. It wasn't that he didn't know that this seventh brother of his was a little unreliable, but he didn't expect him to be such a bastard. his ability to attract hatred was really at the peak. He had completely destroyed the image that he had accumulated over 1,000,000 years. Others might not know the origin of this impostor, but how could Shui Leihan himself not know what his own brother did? This fellow was the number one unreasonable person in the Heaven Imperial Court, the number one troublemaker, the number one bandit, the number one lone bandit in the entire Heaven Imperial Court. The heavens didn't rob him. In other words, other than the heavens above his head that he didn't rob because it was useless, as long as it was something that he wanted, it would become his no matter what. Back then, when Yun Shangren became a Saint Lord, he took a liking to the crown that belonged to Yun Shangren. He was willing to lay low for 100 years just to snatch it away. Although he was heavily injured, Yun Shangren had lost his chance to ascend to the throne. Because, as long as something was in this fellow's hands, even the gods wouldn't be able to take it away. Even if Shui Leihan came forward to ask for it, he would definitely be rejected. Such a fellow was originally lawless. Not to mention Wu Yequang, even if he was facing the Saint Lord Cloud Master, this fellow would still dare to mock and ridicule him. Even if he were to draw his sword and start a fight, he would still be a strong character who definitely had the power to fight. Although this fellow's cultivation wasn't as good as his, he was on par with the few people with weaker cultivation after D. It was hard to tell who was better. Even if they were to really fight, he would still be full of confidence. But, no matter how confident you are, you can't reveal your bandit aura when you're impersonating me. Little did he know that this impostor was also cursing in his heart. What Dian Queen, all of you are putting on airs, I don't like looking at you. That short guy with a crooked face actually calls himself a handsome guy. Fuck, the real handsome guy is clearly standing here and hasn't said anything. Who do you think you are? I have no choice. I'm impersonating my big brother. If not, I'll teach each and every one of you a lesson on the spot, in his heart. In fact, he had already given them a lot of face and left them a lot of leeway. If Wild Sword Heavenly Emperor Wu Yequang knew of this guy's true thoughts, he would probably immediately fight him to the death, not rest until one of them was dead. Who is protecting this stairway to heaven? The Demon Empress looked at Xie Dan Qiong as he walked up the stairway. Her eyes flashed with a rare dignified look. The other celestial emperors could tell that Emperor Jasper Flower had been ambushed at least 1,000 times along the way. However, Great Emperor Jasper Flower didn't make a move at all. She merely continued to advance slowly. In fact, he didn't even activate his protective Yuan Qi. This was equivalent to handing over his life to those who were protecting him. He obviously had absolute confidence in those who were protecting him. Because of this, the heavenly emperors were even more astonished. That was because those tyrannical attacks had all vanished into thin air at the first moment. They had disappeared into the spatial cracks, and the people who had attacked had all lost their souls. Not even their corpses remained. That was not all. The most surprising thing was all of this. No one actually discovered it at all. At least those below the saint level couldn't discover anything. As for ordinary people, it was a scene of singing and dancing. It was peaceful. Smooth. Too smooth. Great Emperor Jasper Flower's 7-star guards haven't made a move at all. Then who was the one who made a move? Isn't this strength a little too high? Qibei Heaven's Yen Yang Heavenly Emperor Long Yinghuan's face was extremely solemn. When this sentence came out, everyone's expression changed slightly. If that was the case, Mo Yuntian's current strength had to be re-evaluated. The foundation that Great Emperor Jasper Flower had revealed so far was already shocking to the extreme. But they didn't know that the resources consumed by the Tribulation Brothers, Tan Tan and Mo Lei, or along the way was definitely a super astronomical figure. Before Xie Dan Qiong reached the 4th level, each of them had already swallowed 2 heavy pills. The terrifying consumption along the way, even as the master of the Tribulation Sword, Chu Yang also felt that it was extremely strenuous. This was because wherever Xie Dan Qiong went, there would be a death zone formed by the combined consciousness of the Tribulation Brothers within a radius of 5,000 feet. As long as someone came into contact with this zone, it would instantly trigger a space crack and devour them completely. This was the space-devouring formation that Mo Tianji had painstakingly set up. It was also the formation formed by Chu Yang's countless souls of purple crystal and another mysterious formation that complemented each other. It was activated by a huge amount of mental energy. Only then did it form a powerful formation that was absolutely fatal. It was also the strongest trump card of today's ascension ceremony. With Chu Yang as the leader, Mo Tianji and Mo Tianji as the unscrupulous person to activate the devouring formation. Mo Qingwu, Gu Duxing, Dong Wushang, Ao Shiyun, Rui Badong, GMO, Luo Kadi, Tan Tan, Mo Lei, and Zi Sheqing combine their powers to activate the devouring formation. All of the spiritual power, all of the spiritual power, all of the spiritual power, all of the cultivation power, all of the power, as long as it could be used, Mo Tianji used the power of the formation to forcefully combine them together. This kind of power was really abundant and irresistible. Even a 7-star guard could be instantly swallowed by it. Of course, with the might of such a formation being so terrifying, there were naturally many requirements. Apart from the massive amount of souls of purple crystal, the most dangerous requirement was that as long as any one of them had the slightest distracting thought, the other 11 would all suffer an irreversible and intense backlash. This was undoubtedly a huge gamble. This was the safest method that Mo Tianji could think of in the face of an unknown and powerful enemy. However, it was also the most dangerous method. This was because everyone would be consigned to eternal damnation as long as one of them was not of one mind and one mind. However, Mo Tianji completely believed in these people who were participating in the formation. They would definitely be of one mind and of one mind. For the glory of our brothers, we would do our best without hesitation. We might not be able to deal with the challenges on the 8th level, but along the way, we would take on all the attacks. This was the common thought of all the brothers. Today can be considered an eye-opener. In all the previous Celestial Emperor's ascension ceremonies, only the Xie Danqiong had to endure so many attacks and disturbances. I really don't know what the mastermind behind these assassins is thinking. Don't they know that this is a method of making a mortal enemy of a celestial emperor? Or is that person's strength already enough to disregard our generation? The demon empress looked at the space cracks that kept flashing, appearing and disappearing in the air. In just a short while everyone was arguing, they had already flashed at least a few hundred times. Those hundreds of flashes meant that thousands of top-notch experts had been killed without a sound or trace, turning into wisps of green smoke. Their souls had scattered, and they had turned into ashes without leaving any trace behind. The guy who pretended to be Shui Leihan said indifferently, walking through the gaps between the wind and rain, laughing proudly between life and death, only then can one be considered a hero of a generation. Since Xie Danqiong stepped on the heavenly stairway all the way to the 7th step now, he has experienced a total of 478 attacks. Yes, it's already 503 attacks now. In the short time that he said this sentence, another 20 or so waves of attacks turned into nothingness in the space cracks. However, such frequent attacks are still just probing attacks and not decisive attacks. And this point is already enough to shock people. With such strength, such influence, and being able to mobilize such a large amount of manpower, the true strength of the mastermind behind this is really shocking and terrifying. Yao Exen continued to draw hatred for the mastermind with her mouth, but her beautiful eyes looked at a certain impostor with some surprise. She thought to herself, although this guy's personality is very strange, his eyesight and arithmetic skills are really not low. He actually counted all of them, and not a single one of them was off. It was really not easy. The ascension of the Jade Flower Emperor is not like some people. However, just as the Demon Empress was about to praise him, this guy reverted to his old ways and said mockingly, when some people ascended the throne, they had Cloud Master to hold the fort. Naturally, there was no wind or waves, no clouds for thousands of miles, and they were so awesome that they were in a mess. They walked up so easily, looking like a heifer that knows how to ride the clouds, awesome to the heavens. Actually, that kind of road, even a dog could climb up with its tail wagging. When this sentence came out, the hatred instantly skyrocketed. Everyone glared at him, and there was no lack of murderous intent. This was no longer just drawing hatred, it was simply group ridicule, and it was a large-scale and indiscriminate ultimate group ridicule. It was really too domineering. The extreme sky sovereign Emperor Zhe Wuqing and the Qibei heavenly Emperor Yenyang Longinghuan both looked like they were about to spit fire. They looked at this guy and said, "Shui Leihan, what do you mean by this? Who are you scolding?" The South Pole heavenly Emperor Meng Jinghui's eyes were also filled with anger. He looked at Shui Leihan and said lightly, "Brother Shui, are you mocking me?" Everyone else's faces were also red, and they looked at this Dong Huang angrily. It looked like they were about to gang up and attack. The demon empress held her forehead, a little dumbfounded. She was just speechless. Motherfucker, where did this idiot come from? Opening his mouth at the slightest provocation, capturing everyone in one fell swoop. Other than Dong Huang Shui Leihan and the demon empress Yao Exing, all of the other people here had been visited by the saint when they ascended the throne. This old lady wanted to direct the spearhead to that person in charge several times, but this guy was good. With just one sentence, he directly offended everyone. The 10 great heavenly emperors and 1 saint monarch, these people were all people who could shake the heavens with a spit of saliva. He actually offended 8 of them, including the demon empress herself. He had really offended them to the point of swelling. This kind of ability to attract hatred was truly unprecedented and unparalleled since the beginning of time. If a competition to draw hatred was held, this guy would definitely be the winner. There was no doubt about this. Chapter 2397. Dong Huang Shui Leihan looked at the celestial emperors coldly. Suddenly, he snorted and shook his head. "Don't you understand human language? Whatever you think I mean, that's what I mean. Why, you can do it, but others can't." He did not have a good impression of these people in his heart. Now that he knew the truth, he found them even more unpleasant to the eye. At this moment, he followed his temper and said whatever was unpleasant to hear. How could he still care about who the other party was when the heavenly bandit's temper flared up? Good, good, good. All the celestial emperors gritted their teeth and nodded slowly. "Shui Leihan, you win. After this ceremony is over, we must get intimate with each other. Let's see if you, the East Sovereign of the heaven-suppressing tower, can really cover the sky with one hand and look down on all the heroes in the world. That's why I said you have no guts." This Dong Huang Shui Leihan slanted his nose and said, "If you want to fight, fight now. But you don't dare to fight now, just find some lame excuses. Aren't you all afraid of offending this Jade Flower Emperor? Actually, I can understand. Cloud Master isn't here now, and you have no backbone. What right do you have to fight with me? Even a ruler wouldn't stand under a collapsing wall, let alone the few of you. What you're doing now is what you're doing. But how can there be such a cheap thing in the world?" He spat and scolded, "Is it be? Do you think you're a virgin just because you put on an act? This is a fundamental difference. Once this is over, you'll have long slipped into some rat hole. Why are you still fighting with me?" Shui Leihan. Yao Exing couldn't take it anymore. She shouted, "What are you trying to do, you bastard? You think you're great just because you can fight? Do you have to make a river of blood here now before you're willing to stop? You want to fight? Fight with me." Seeing that the Jade Flower Emperor's ascension ceremony was about to be turned into a big fight between the celestial emperors and the empress, Yao Exing was so angry that she was about to die. The 2 Buddhas had no choice but to jump out and disrupt the situation. They hoped that this blockhead in front of them would at least understand the situation and quickly give up. Especially at the very beginning. On the surface, he was calling out Dong Huang, but in fact, he was calling out the real Dong Huang Shui Leihan. What he meant was, "You better control your brother. This guy is going to start a world war soon." The faces of the other heavenly emperors were already flushed red. Panting heavily, it seemed like the situation was about to erupt at any moment. For millions of years, not a single celestial emperor had ever suffered such a blatant insult, let alone now that they were all gathered in one place and being attacked by someone. In fact, everyone felt that they were so angry that their livers were hurting and their guts were trembling. No matter what, he could not tolerate this. This Dong Huang had really gone too far. Could it be that just because you have a cultivation second only to a saint, you can look down on us? It's true that we can't beat you one by one, but we have so many people here. I don't believe that we can't beat you if we work together. Didn't he see how angry the demon empress was? She's second only to Dong Huang, and she's taking the lead. Was Xue Leihan still okay? Xue Leihan, who had been hiding in the dark for millions of years, was also so angry at his own brother that he was about to stomp his feet. No, he was already stomping his feet. This bastard, he had already warned him more than 10 times beforehand. Repeatedly, this guy also nodded and agreed to everything. But now, he threw all of them to the back of his mind. Even if he just let out a fart, he could still stink for a while. But this guy could change his attitude as fast as flipping a book. Yet, he was hiding in the dark and could not show himself at all. Otherwise, he would have long slapped this guy back to the eastern royal heavens. He hurriedly scolded him via telepathy, "You bastard! Are you courting death? Damn you, when you go back, I'll punish you according to the family rules. I'll punish you properly, you bastard." In his anger, Xue Leihan scolded him, but he was already spouting nonsense. That impersonating Dong Huang immediately replied via telepathy, "Xue Leihan, you really have guts. You dare to scold my mother. And you scold my mother? My mother is your mother. You dare to scold our mother. You're really too gutsy. You actually scolded me as a bastard. We have the same mother. If I'm a bastard, even if you don't hatch a bastard, you'll be a turtle egg. Damn you. How dare you scold our father and mother as bastards? When we go back, I'll go to the ancestral hall with you and have a good talk with you, you bastard." Xue Leihan's breath was stuck in his throat, and he almost fainted. He said weakly, "I'm going to vomit blood." However, the impersonating Dong Huang in front of him also seemed to feel that he had more or less gone overboard. Looking at the celestial emperors approaching from all directions, he could only reluctantly explain, "Of course, I'm not talking about all of you. I'm talking about some people in your land, and whoever is the most agitated." When this sentence came out, even Yao Exan really didn't expect it. This sentence was the real killer's move. The one in charge was invincible. So what if they weren't invincible? How could they not be invincible? All the celestial emperors were almost going crazy from holding it in, but other than glaring angrily, none of them spoke first, and none of them made a move. Whoever made a move, wouldn't that be admitting that they were one of those people? All of them were panting heavily, veins popping on their foreheads, but they couldn't take a step forward. Yao Exan heaved a long sigh of relief. She thought to herself that at least they didn't fight on the spot. Although everyone had resentment in their hearts, it was still within a range that could be controlled. However, she heard this Dong Huang say again, "But all of you also know that even if we really fight, all of you are no match for me." In an instant, Yao Exan's head swelled. She almost wanted to worship this guy in front of her. "Big brother, why do you dare to say anything? How long are you going to offend people?" Seeing that all the celestial emperors were about to explode and fight, fortunately at this moment, the Jade Flower Emperor had already safely ascended to the 8th level with his wife. From the moment they ascended to the first step of the celestial stairway to the 8th level, all the attacks suddenly disappeared, and peace returned. Not even the slightest bit of trouble was left. Everyone knew that the 8th level was where the celestial emperors were. Whoever dared to make a move in the dark here would not only be provoking the celestial emperors, but also the entire celestial emperors. How was that different from courting death? Although a certain person in charge didn't care whether more of the 10,000 saints' celestial spirits would die or not, it was still too risky to make a move so openly in front of so many people. Therefore, from this moment on, they could only make a move openly. In other words, Xie Danqiong's real test had only officially begun here. Of course, other than a few people, the rest didn't know that from this level onwards, the real Xie Danqiong had actually changed. What replaced him was the Dong Huang, Xue Leihan, who was truly second only to the celestial emperors in terms of identity, status, and cultivation in the entire Heaven Imperial Court. There had never been anyone who could so thoroughly portray second only to the celestial emperors in the world. However, Xue Leihan was fully deserving of this title. One could imagine what kind of expression those celestial spirits would have when they confidently sent out their main forces only to be met with the most terrifying counterattack that they couldn't resist at all. Seeing that Xie Danqiong and his wife had finally entered the initial stages of the 8th level, Chu Yang finally heaved a long sigh of relief. He only felt that he was on the verge of collapsing and almost couldn't stand up straight. His vision was actually turning black. Looking at the other brothers, all of them were the same. It seemed that they were even worse than him. GMO was even floating as he walked, as if he could lie down on the ground at any time and never get up again. No matter whether it was in terms of mental energy, cultivation, or divine senses, they had all overdrawn too many times on this journey just now. In the past, they would only use one heavy pill in a life and death battle. However, from the first level of the celestial stairs until now, they had all used up an average of more than 20 heavy pills each. In total, they had used up close to 300 heavy pills. This was a rather huge number. Although heavy pills were the #1 healing panacea in the world, their main purpose was to heal injuries and prolong life, replenish one's energy, recover one's cultivation, and condition the body. However, after eating so many in such a short period of time, everyone still needed to digest them properly to avoid any adverse effects. Mo Tianji also heaved a long sigh of relief and immediately consumed another heavy pill. Everyone else could rest, but Mo Tianji and Chu Yang couldn't. Even though they knew that consuming heavy pills would do more harm than good in the long run, they had no choice but to do so. Chu Yang had another mission, while Mo Tianji had to continue maintaining the basic operation of the formation. When Mo Tianji consumed the heavy pill, Chu Yang had already swallowed the heavy pill in his mouth without leaving a trace. Chu Luer and Chu Yang, who hadn't made a move all this while, were disguised as Xie Danqiong's accompanying palace maids and attendants. At this moment, they were following behind Xie Danqiong and Madame Mei. Their white robes were whiter than snow, and they looked like fairies on the 8th level of the platform. Originally, Xie Danqiong had insisted that all of his brothers should appear together at this ascension ceremony to enjoy this great glory together and experience the feeling of standing at the peak. However, Jade Flower Emperor, who had just suggested this idea, was fiercely criticized by Mo Tianji and Chu Yang. "We brothers can only climb to the top one by one. If we go up together at the so-called peak of the world, wouldn't we be courting death together?" This was Mo Tianji's words. "The time isn't ripe yet. You just have to wait for us to gather at the peak. There will definitely be such a day." This was Chu Yang's words. GMO, Luo Kudi, and Rui Butong had wanted to cheer when they heard Xie Danqiong's words. However, they were smacked back by these two heavy blows. Most of his brothers had already stopped at their original places and were meditating and recuperating. However, Mo Tianji was still in charge of the overall situation in the dark, and Chu Yang was following behind him. Therefore, Xie Danqiong was very confident in his heart. Chapter 2398. Therefore, when Xie Danqiong walked towards Di Queen's seat, he was still calm, poised, and full of bearing. There was no nervousness or uneasiness at all. It was as if he was originally a member of this place. Now, he had just casually walked here again. Jade Flower Emperor has already ascended the Heavenly Emperor stage. Mu Songlan's voice once again reverberated through the heavens and earth, with uncontrollable excitement and impulsiveness. "Here, there is our absolute, honorable guest. He will meet Jade Flower Emperor and establish an alliance." Everyone in Ink Cloud Sky jumped up and shouted as if they had gone crazy. "The Empress! Only Saint Monarch! The Empress! Only Saint Monarch! Mighty! Mighty!" The Empress and only Saint Monarch were legendary top figures. Every one of them was like an ethereal deity above the clouds. In fact, they were deities in this world. They were definitely not simple emperors. Xie Danqiong smiled and walked in calmly. The first one he walked towards was of course the first one after the Empress, Donghuang Xue Leihan. And at this moment, behind Donghuang Xue Leihan, there were already two more people who had appeared out of nowhere. They stood straight behind this Donghuang, Xue Leihan. These two were the personal guards of Donghuang. Normally, they were invisible and would not show themselves in front of others. But at this moment, facing the newly ascended Ink Cloud Sky Jade Flower Emperor, they could only show themselves. This was a form of expression and also a form of respect. Behind the other heavenly emperors and demon empresses, there were also two more people like this. Only the maniac sword heavenly emperor Wu Yaquang's side was a little creepy. He himself was already ugly enough, but the two people behind him were actually even more ugly than him. Humans were always afraid of comparisons. Ever since those two guards appeared, Wu Yaquang, who was previously an eyesore in everyone's eyes, actually became much more pleasing to the eye. Fresh flowers needed green as a foil, and to set off withered grass, as long as one could find withered grass, that was all. Jade Flower Emperor walked in calmly and had a friendly chat with our first honorable guest. Now, let me introduce our first guest today. He's the master of the Eastern Royal Heaven. Mu Tsonglan's voice was hoarse from all the shouting. Eastern Emperor Monarch, Xue Leihan. Just as he finished speaking, the auspicious clouds in the sky suddenly tumbled and surged. A bright golden cloud appeared in the sky. The golden cloud tumbled and formed 8 mountain-like characters in the sky. The majestic eastern sky, the illustrious East Sovereign. Following the appearance of these 8 words, the cries of Mo Yuntian's citizens grew louder and louder, shaking the heavens and earth. Donghuang Xue Leihan stood up gracefully with a warm smile on his face. At this moment, a huge image of Donghuang suddenly appeared in midair. Donghuang Xue Leihan stood with his hands behind his back, looking graceful and confident as he faced the world. At this moment, Donghuang's outstanding image instantly conquered the world. As expected of the Donghuang. This kind of temperament, this kind of demeanor, this kind of image, it really made people fall for him. Only the various great heavenly emperors saw this scene and only felt their mouths full of teeth aching. No, it's not just a feeling, it's really painful. Is what we saw real? Is this still the person who was hooting with us just now? They saw. Donghuang Xue Leihan smiled amiably and said, "Brother Xie, congratulations. You're amazing. You're still so young and you're already able to achieve so much. You're indeed a young hero." Xie Danqiong was neither servile nor overbearing. He smiled and said, "Brother Xue, you're too kind. You're too kind. Compared to these." This Donghuang Xue Leihan was about to revert to his old ways and talk nonsense again. Xue Leihan, who was hiding in the dark, hurriedly stopped him. "Enough. Don't play with your mouth anymore. At this time, if you can speak less, then speak less. Compared to these people, you're much more handsome and confident." This Donghuang Xue Leihan was stopped, and the words that he wanted to say became such a superficial sentence. Xie Danqiong also heaved a sigh of relief and said, "You're too kind." After saying that, he was about to walk towards the demon empress. Unexpectedly, this Donghuang Xue Leihan said behind him, "Sai, when these people ascended to your current position, they were all old monkeys. Don't be fooled by their youthful appearances. In fact, they're all old and shameless people who just won't die." This sentence was said very, very softly. Naturally, it didn't shake the world and spread throughout the world. However, who were Di and the Empress? How could they not hear it? All of them couldn't help but be angry. Among them, the Demon Empress, Demon Exen, was the angriest. It was fine if a bunch of stinky men said that, but women hated it the most when people said that they were old, and so on. This Donghuang Xue Leihan was the first to say that he was old in front of the Demon Empress. It directly made the Demon Empress so angry that her liver swelled up. However, she couldn't do anything because, seeing Xie Danqiong walking towards her, the Demon Empress could only forcefully suppress the urge to beat this Donghuang up. She stood up with a dignified bearing and a smile. The golden cloud in midair churned and instantly changed into another 8 words. "Only I, the Demon Empress, am magnificent in the world." At the same time, the Demon Empress's peerless figure also appeared in the sky. Facing the world, That peerless grace immediately made everyone fall for her. Such pinnacle power, such a peerless beauty. No hero in the world dares to be her. Greetings, Demon Empress. Xie Danqiong bowed slightly. Madame Mei at the side also bowed at the same time. This was something that couldn't be helped. Xie Danqiong and Yao Ningning called each other brothers, and their status had long been established. The Demon Empress was equivalent to his elder. This etiquette was something that couldn't be neglected. The Demon Empress didn't avoid arousing suspicion at all. She helped the two of them up one by one and sized them up. She praised, "Your Majesty Qianghua and the Empress are indeed a match made in heaven. Today, you have reached the pinnacle hand in hand. It's really worthy of celebration." Xie Danqiong smiled. "Demon Empress, you're too kind. I hope you can guide me." Well said. The Demon Empress' face was full of smiles. She lowered her voice and said, "This Shui Leihan is full of nonsense. He's a little crazy today. The two of you must not believe what he says." Xie Danqiong was very surprised and made a sound. He seemed to be a little confused and didn't know what was going on here. Why was the Demon Empress's words so ridiculous? However, they were very surprised to see the other Everyone's face was full of joy. This sentence of the Demon Empress was really too satisfying. Yao Exer held Madame Mei's hand and said, "Your Majesty Qianghua, let the Empress accompany me for a chat here. I'm so lonely here without a woman to talk to." Xie Danqiong naturally agreed. The Demon Empress' move was undoubtedly to completely protect Madame Mei. Instantly, more than half of the various schemes that could be carried out by the enemy were destroyed. In the world, there seemed to be only a few who could hurt others under the Demon Empress' protection. Next, the third seat was the everlasting celestial emperor of the Daluo heaven, Ziwuji. Supreme of the Daluo heaven, hero everlasting. When he heard the introduction, Chu Yang, who was behind Xie Danqiong, couldn't help but raise his eyelids and take a careful look at the face of this everlasting celestial emperor. Then he lowered his head again. He felt a little strange. How could there be two people with the surname Zi in the first D and the Empress? He still remembered that Zi Hao, the heavenly emperor of the purple clouds, was also surnamed Zi. And this Daluo heaven emperor was also surnamed Zi. Could it be a coincidence? It was most likely a coincidence. If Zi Wuji really had a relationship with Zi Hao, Shui Leihan should know. The fourth seat was Heavenly Emperor Mo Yun's. Xie Danqiong didn't stop and went straight to the fifth seat, Heavenly Emperor of the Stupa Heaven, Mo Huichen. The celestial emperor, who was dressed in snow-white robes and had black hair, looked like an otherworldly being at first glance. He did not look like an emperor who controlled the world at all. Heaven and earth have roots, Mo Huichen returns to the world. Xie Danqiong couldn't completely understand the meaning of these words for a moment, so he smiled and went on. The various heavenly emperors all presented gifts, and of course, the gifts wouldn't be personally taken out by the heavenly emperors. Their subordinates would give and receive. Ranked first was Heavenly Emperor of the South Pole, Meng Jingwei. Heavenly Emperor of Ice and Snow, Dream of Life. Of these words, the first four words were a true portrayal of the geography of the South Pole, and the last four words were related to Meng Jinghui's unique divine technique. Dream of Life. If Heavenly Emperor of Ice and Snow, Meng Jinghui, used this technique, even the descendants of Di would inevitably be affected and unconsciously recall all kinds of things in their lives that were worth dreaming of at night, and some relatively weaker cultivators would even fall into a nightmare from then on, and spend their whole lives between the past and the present. All the past events would linger, and they would never be able to wake up again. Ranked seventh was Heavenly Emperor of the Western Sky, Wu Yaquang. Western Sky, I am Yaquang. When Wu Yaquang stood up to greet Xie Danqiong suddenly discovered that his stature was actually so tall, so superior to others. All along, the group of brothers had all been tall and well-proportioned. Xie Danqiong walked among them. In terms of stature, he wasn't the slightest bit outstanding. Chu Yang, Gu Duxing, and Dong Wushang were even slightly taller than him. Therefore, he had always been used to this. The most important thing was that when martial artists of the Heavenly Imperial Court generally reached Earth or Heaven level, they would be able to change their basic appearance, and from that time onwards, they would be fixed. Under normal circumstances, they would fix themselves to look a bit better. Therefore, as long as it was a martial artist, it could be said that there were many handsome men and beautiful women. Admittedly, their stature wouldn't be excessively tall, and even less too short. But now that Xie Danqiong was facing Wu Yakuang, he instantly felt a heartfelt superiority. This heavenly emperor of the wild sword, whose fame was awe-inspiring, only reached Xie Danqiong's chest when he stood up straight. Xie Danqiong was taller by 2 heads, and he even had an extra neck. The two people stood together, one was handsome and confident, like a jade tree facing the wind, in his prime, and the other was set off like a pile of dog shit that no one cared about. Chapter 2399. For a moment, De and the others actually couldn't help but burst into laughter. You don't have to be surprised. That Donghuang Shui Leihan spoke again. The Maniac Sword Heavenly Emperor is not his original appearance. There's a reason why he became like this. Wu Yakuang's neck also flushed red. He bared his teeth. Shui Leihan. That His Majesty Eastern Sovereign shrugged his shoulders and said with a smile, Frenzied Sword Heavenly Emperor could also be considered a handsome man back then, but when he was breaking through, at the critical moment of remolding, he was suddenly smashed by a hammer from the top of his head. It was like a ball of soft mud that hadn't completely dried yet and was smashed down by someone. But, as everyone knows, that remodeling is the most important. Once it's damaged, it can't be recovered for life. Therefore, the Maniac Sword Heavenly Emperor suffered a tragedy and became like this today. This time, not only Xie Danqiong, even the other Heavenly Emperors also let out a meaningful "oh." From the looks of it, everyone actually didn't know about this matter. One had to praise His Majesty East Sovereign for being really knowledgeable, of course. The premise was if he didn't say those words next. That situation. At this moment, everyone felt that the Emperor East Sovereign who was speaking now was infinitely wretched, infinitely gloating, and even a little shifty-eyed. They couldn't help but be taken aback. They only heard him continue. That situation is like when a person just entered his mother's womb, he was hit by a hammer. The last laugh was simply wretched to the extreme. The Heavenly Emperors understood tacitly and cracked their lips into wretched smiles. The Demon Empress spat and scolded. Nothing good comes out of a dog's mouth. She turned her head and pretended not to hear. The Maniac Sword Heavenly Emperor Wu Yakuang was panting. He glared and roared, Shui Leihan, can't you fucking speak less? In the dark, the real Emperor East Sovereign who knew his brother's personality well covered his face. If you didn't speak, he might still speak less. Once you speak, it's really over, indeed. This, His Majesty Donghuang, was already grinning from ear to ear. He chuckled and said, Do you know who hit the hammer so hard at such a crucial moment? Wu Yakuang leaped up, furious. Shui Leihan. He was so embarrassed that he couldn't even finish his sentence. Shui Leihan dodged left and right, his movements extremely nimble. Mo Qingqing, Zi Wuji and the others acted as his accomplices, stopping Wu Yakuang who was about to go berserk. They urged him one by one. Hurry up and speak, hurry up and speak. It seemed that people's gossiping mentality was the same regardless of whether they were men or women, high or low in status. He was especially interested in the embarrassing stories of people of the same rank as him. His Majesty Donghuang laughed heartily. The place where the Frenzied Sword Heavenly Emperor is in seclusion is so secretive that ordinary people naturally don't know about it. How could it be smashed by a hammer? Moreover, it was such a crucial strike. This guy was obviously trying to extort him. The Demon Empress might have turned her head away, but her ears were perked up to listen. It was obvious that she was very interested in this information. But this guy stopped at such a crucial moment, obviously to keep them in suspense. That's right, why? Zi Wuji asked cooperatively. The others also revealed curious looks in their eyes. You want to know? His Majesty Donghuang asked with a smile. Of course. The group of heavenly emperors nodded. His Majesty Donghuang raised his head. But I don't want to tell you. Everyone was speechless. Damn it. This guy was really asking for a beating today. Wu Yaquang heaved a sigh of relief. His face was purple and he was panting heavily. He thought to himself, this guy still has a bottom line after all, but he didn't expect His Majesty Donghuang to show his true colors in the next moment. Buying information in the pugilistic world costs a lot of purple cloud coins. You actually want to get information from me without risking anything? This sentence directly exposed more than half of his identity as the #1 bandit. Fortunately, everyone's interest was now piqued by his topic. No one thought of anything else and just urged him. Isn't it just money? Just name your price and I won't bargain. What kind of people were present? To these people, purple cloud coins were just a bunch of numbers and didn't have any more meaning. They could take out as much as they wanted. His Majesty Donghuang took the money and beamed with delight. Then, he said contentedly, let me tell you, the one who hit the maniac sword Heavenly Emperor, Shui Leihan, I'll fight it out with you. Wu Yaquang rushed up desperately but was stopped by Mo Qingqing, Zi Wuji, Meng Jinghui and Mo Huichen at the same time. They winked at him. Hurry up and say it. We've already paid. We're most interested in this kind of information. It's the maniac sword Heavenly Emperor's first wife. Haha. His Majesty Donghuang's schadenfreude had reached the extreme. Wu Yaquang has always been a playboy. Usually, he uses his handsome face to flirt everywhere. That day, he even wanted to become the most handsome man in the world so that he could continue to flirt. That sister-in-law got angry and hit him with a hammer at the critical moment. Ha! It's so satisfying, everyone's eyes widened in an instant. There was such a thing? Zi Wuji cursed from the bottom of his heart. What the fuck? There's such a thing. Instantly, everyone burst into laughter. While everyone was laughing, they also felt incredulous. There was actually such a weird wife in this world. In order to prevent her husband from flirting, she directly hit her husband into a dwarf with a hammer. The problem was, with the maniac sword Heavenly Emperor's identity and status, as long as you didn't destroy his manhood, no matter how ugly he was, he could still have endless luck with women, His Majesty Donghuang said with some regret. It's a pity that sister-in-law hit the wrong place with her hammer. If she really hit the part related to flirting, then our maniac sword Heavenly Emperor would really be honest. Sigh, for the sake of a mountain, all was for naught. Lamentable, lamentable. The group of celestial emperors were overjoyed, each and every one of them sighing. That's right, it's such a pity. It's really such a pity. Why couldn't sister-in-law hit it more accurately? What's the use of hitting the top part? She should hit the bottom part? Makes sense. Wu Yi roared madly. Shui Leihan, you and I are irreconcilable. His Majesty Donghuang put his hands behind his back and said lightly, if you want to be irreconcilable with Shui Leihan, it doesn't matter. I'll wait for you at any time. I'm just afraid that you won't dare to come. But in his heart, he thought, what has your irreconcilable relationship with Shui Leihan got to do with me? When you two fight, I'll definitely watch the show from the side. To be honest, I haven't seen two heavenly emperors fight yet. Please don't be irreconcilable, or the scene will definitely not be fiery enough. Shui Leihan, who was in the dark, only felt that his heart and liver were swollen from anger. At this moment, he finally realized one thing. Choosing this bastard to impersonate himself was the most unwise, most stupid, and most unforgivable mistake he had ever made in his life. There was no other. After this mess, the originally elegant and graceful His Majesty Donghuang had completely degenerated into a little ruffian, like a city hooligan on the streets. Like that, again, even if it were Tan Tan, GMO, Ning Tai, and the Tang clan's third young master Tang Yangwei, they would still have to admit defeat, bow their heads, or even kneel down and worship him. He was simply too domineering. His Majesty Donghuang, who wanted to cry, was simply about to vomit blood. Xie Danqiong smiled for a while and continued to walk forward. But in his heart he asked himself, is this guy really His Majesty Donghuang's biological brother? Brothers from the same mother? This character? How can there be such a huge difference? This is a little exaggerated. 8th place, Heavenly Emperor Zui Wuqing of the Extreme Heaven. Heaven and earth are heartless, Zui Meng Wuqing of the Extreme Heaven. Heavenly Emperor Zui of the Extreme Heaven was originally the pivot of the various heavens and earth. However, due to the transcendent existence of the saint, this Heavenly Emperor Wuqing was almost completely ignored by everyone. He was directly pushed to the edge by a few other heavenly emperors. 9th place, Heavenly Emperor Wei of the Green Heaven, Mo Qingqing. Only my green heaven and earth. 10th place, Northern Heaven, Heavenly Emperor Yen Yang of the Red Heaven, Longinghuan. Northern Heaven, Longinghuan. After meeting with all the heavenly emperors, it was the most important segment. Ascending to the last step of the stairway to heaven. Ascending to the position of Heavenly Emperor. Although the MC, Mu Zonglan, had a high position, it was his first time assuming the role of MC. A coronation ceremony was made by him like a wedding ceremony for newlyweds. However, not a single person objected to it. Who said that a coronation ceremony should be like this? This was Ink Cloud Heaven, the world of Jade Flower Great Emperor. If Jade Flower Great Emperor said there was no problem, then there was no problem. As for DE and Empress, they also had no objections. Not only did they have no objections, a few people were even envious. Because when they ascended the throne, due to their unstable foundation, they were far from such a grand display. At this moment, Mu Zonglan was so excited that his whole body was trembling. He shouted loudly, "Invite Heavenly Emperor Ink Cloud, Jade Flower Great Emperor to ascend the throne." The sound of drums sounded all around. DE and Empress stood up at the same time and stretched out their hands. This was an attitude, expressing their support. Of course, a few people's expressions were complicated and somewhat anxious, as if they were waiting for something. However, under such circumstances, they could only express courtesy. Xie Danqiong laughed, cupped his hands, and said, "Many thanks." His body floated, and with a whoosh he pulled out countless afterimages. He had already reached the bottom of the first step to the next level. At this moment, the cannon salute sounded. For a moment, heaven and earth shook, and white smoke rose, covering the sky and earth. Everyone couldn't help but turn their heads to look. It was at this moment that Chu Yang made his move silently. The real Great Emperor Jasper Flower entered the tribulation space with a whoosh. Xie Danqiong's afterimage was left behind, and the cannon salute was fired. At this moment, before the first step, there was still a Jade Flower Great Emperor standing solemnly. Chapter 2400. It was just that this Jasper Flower Great Emperor was already a different person. Donghuang Shui Leihan. Shui Leihan had an elegant temperament to begin with, and Xie Danqiong was also from an aristocratic family. Apart from the lack of Donghuang's majestic aura, their temperaments were not very different. If Xie Danqiong were to impersonate Shui Leihan now, it would be extremely difficult. However, Shui Leihan impersonated Xie Danqiong perfectly. Not to mention others, even Brother Jie couldn't tell the difference at all. Only Madame Mei, Xie Danqiong's wife, could tell at a glance when she saw this impersonator. Because this fake Xie Danqiong didn't have that kind of deep love for her at all. Besides, she didn't have that kind of impulse to jump into his arms the moment she saw him. This was especially important. But no matter what, this impersonation was already a complete success. Just like that, silently, in front of all the heroes of the world, surrounded by DE and Empress, the impersonation was successfully impersonated. Even the Demon Empress, who was already aware of this matter, didn't notice this trick. Shui Leihan's eyes flashed with a faint murderous intent. This time, Donghuang had already made up his mind to use Xie Danqiong's appearance to start a massacre. He would kill all those who dared to come and cause trouble at this moment until their blood flowed like a river. I haven't killed for so many years, I seem to miss it. It also makes people forget the majesty of DE and Empress back then. Looks like Zihao is still right. There's no need to show mercy to those who deserve to be killed. Let me make the world tremble for once today. Shui Leihan's impersonation of Xie Danqiong had a gentle smile on his face. He was calm and confident. No one could see that on this gentle and confident face, there was also a dark and cold murderous intent. And once this murderous intent was unleashed, it was enough to slaughter the world. The MC's voice was filled with heartfelt excitement as it boomed. After suffering so much, the people of Moyun Heaven finally welcomed their destiny today. The land of destiny welcomes the true master of Moyun Heaven. Jasper Flower Great Emperor's ascension to the throne is exactly what the people of Moyun Heaven hope for. All the people of the world are sincerely convinced. Just as the MC was shouting himself hoarse, a certain fake Jasper Flower Great Emperor was about to step onto the first step. Suddenly, someone shouted like a thunderclap. "I'm not convinced." Emperor Jasper Flower's footsteps suddenly halted. Then, someone laughed coldly and said, "How can a mere Xie Dan Qiong be the celestial emperor of a region? I'm also not convinced." In the next moment, another person said, "What do you mean by, no one is convinced? I refuse to accept this. What virtue and ability do you have? You're nothing more than making up the numbers, vainly attempting to seize the position of a celestial emperor. How disdainful!" This series of voices caused the entire place to fall into an unprecedented silence. In the next moment, a holy light suddenly bloomed in the sky. Many rainbows flashed across the sky, and several figures appeared in the sky. One in the east, one in the south, one in the north, and one in the west. Although these 4 people came from different directions, they gathered together and stood together in the sky. They looked at Shui Leihan, who was disguised as Xie Dan Qiong, with an attitude of looking down on the world. Their unscrupulous intentions were obvious. This sudden turn of events caused everyone to feel astonished from the bottom of their hearts. This included even the few heavenly emperors who were completely unaware of this. It must be known that at such a celestial emperor's ascension ceremony, when Di and Empress were gathered, there were actually people who jumped out and clearly expressed their intention to cause trouble. This was directly equivalent to slapping Di and Empress in the face. Should this group of people be said to be retarded, or should they be said to be retarded? However, regardless of whether they were idiots or had ulterior motives, the 4 people who came were all super experts. Not to mention other things, just their ability to transform into rainbows was already no small matter. That was the universal illumination realm that only high-level sages and above could achieve. In other words, these 4 people who came had at least reached the level of high-level saints. They might even be infinitely close to the peak of saints. Any one of these experts, no matter which world they were in, was a top-notch ruthless character. Although they couldn't be compared to Di and Empress, they weren't inferior to the 7 star guards of the various big worlds. "What are your intentions for coming here to cause trouble?" Mu Songlan took a deep breath and shouted angrily. He asked, what are their intentions? But he didn't ask about these people's identities and origins. This undoubtedly showed that Mu Songlan knew these people and was completely aware of their origins. Moreover, he was inexplicably shocked. At least Mu Songlan himself wasn't confident that he could deal with these people. Otherwise, he wouldn't have asked but directly attacked. Even an expert like Mu Songlan knew that he was no match for them. From this, it could be seen that these 4 people were extremely powerful. In the north, there was a person dressed in white. He had a scholarly and handsome appearance and had a graceful demeanor. He laughed softly and said, "Our Moyun Heaven is changing the world and is about to appoint a new emperor. This is a huge matter. With such a grand occasion, how can I, Zhuang Shaochen, not come to join in the fun and broaden my horizons?" He smiled softly and said, "Moreover, I was deceived by the heavenly demon in the battle with Yuan Tianji 1,000,000 years ago. How can I not wash away this humiliation and end this karma?" Mu Songlan said coldly, "Zhuang Shaochen, if you want to wash away this humiliation and end this karma, why don't you find Yuan Tianji early on to determine the winner? You shouldn't have come here to cause trouble after Yuan Tianji was killed. The person you are looking for isn't here." Zhuang Shaochen smiled. General Mu's words are wrong. Although Yuan Tianji has become a dead ghost, he was still the heavenly emperor of Ink Cloud. Although the previous heavenly emperor of Ink Cloud is dead, the successor is still around. I naturally have to find him to fight. Moreover, Ink Cloud Heaven is going to appoint a new heavenly emperor. Then, the new heavenly emperor's cultivation should at least be able to convince the masses, right? Now that I'm standing out, it's nothing more than to throw a brick to attract jade in front of the heroes of the world, to let His Majesty, the Sky Emperor, show his peerless cultivation. I'm really well-intentioned. How can you say I'm making trouble? Zhuang Shaoqun spoke vehemently. His smile was very gentle and honest, and he looked neither servile nor overbearing. Mu Songlan gritted his teeth in hatred. Although he knew that this person was twisting words and forcing logic, but when the previous heavenly emperors ascended the throne, there was indeed such a saying. However, the situation this time was special and was different from the past. This Zhuang Shaoqun was one of the few peerless experts in Ink Cloud Heaven. Back then, he was as famous as the Seven Kings. In the battle for the heavenly emperor's throne, he was defeated by Yuan Tianji and was seriously injured. From then on, he disappeared. Mu Songlan thought that this guy had already fallen, but he never thought that at such a critical moment, this guy would actually jump out of thin air and challenge Xie Danqiong. There was no doubt that he wanted to humiliate the Jade Flower Emperor. For a moment, he was at a loss and was at a loss. Mu Songlan suppressed his anger and turned to ask the person from the east, Su Yunqing, what are you doing here? Su Yun had a square face and big ears. His face looked like a rich man, but his eyes flashed with a cold light, and said, The ancient law of the heavenly imperial court, the strong are the kings, the weak are the ministers, the position of the heavenly emperor must be held by someone whose martial strength can surpass the world. Yuan Tianji was able to hold the position of heavenly emperor that day, precisely because he defeated all the people who competed for the position of emperor that day. What ability does Xie Danqiong have to dare to occupy this position? If I defeat Xie Danqiong, then I will be the heavenly emperor. If I can't even hold the position of emperor, how can I protect the peace of this world? The person from the west clapped his hands and praised, Not bad, not bad. I, Nye Qianlong, also have the same idea. The heavenly emperor's throne will take turns. If others can do it, why can't I? If you want me to give up, Xie Danqiong will have to defeat me personally. The person from the south was also a handsome man in a white robe. 3 strands of beard fluttered in the wind. He looked like an immortal. At this moment, he had a faint smile on his face and elegantly said, That's right. I Chu Wuliang also have the same idea. When these 4 people appeared and announced their names, everyone who knew these 4 people turned pale with fright. Divine Lightning Frost King Zhuang Shaoqun, Golden Blade King Su Yunqing, Sky Flipping Spear King Nye Qianlong, Great Deer Mountain King Chu Wuliang. These people were all famous king-level experts of the Black Cloud Sky. They were all top figures on par with the Heart King, Soul King, Book King, Painting King, and others. They were not inferior in the slightest. 1,000,000 years ago, in the battle to decide the heavenly emperor's throne, even with Master Yun Cheng's personal support, these 4 people still stood out to challenge Yuan Tianji. These people's cultivations were all top-notch. Although they looked dignified on the surface, in reality, every one of them was unruly and lawless. Demon Empress Yao Exen frowned slightly and said lightly, How dare the 4 of you be so presumptuous in front of me? Demon Empress's words were equivalent to forcibly taking the blame for herself. However, these 4 people were happy when they heard it. They all thought to themselves, This Xie Danqiong's cultivation is indeed not high. The Demon Empress is actually so nervous that she doesn't hesitate to lower herself and forcibly take action. Divine Frost King Zhuang Shaoqun bowed respectfully and said, Your Majesty, the Demon Empress is wise. The heavenly emperors of the past have all been through millions of blood pools and tens of thousands of battles. How can Xie Danqiong be an exception? Besides, this is the coronation of the heavenly emperor of the Black Cloud Sky. In the end, it is Black Cloud Sky's family affair. Your Majesty, although your cultivation is high and you benefit the world, but if you intervene in our Black Cloud Sky's family affair, it seems that you are overstepping your boundaries. It's not very appropriate. Demon Empress was furious when she heard this. Are you saying that I don't know my limits? The Demon Empress was a heavenly emperor. Her words were always the law. No one dared to criticize her face to face. Although Zhuang Xiaoqin's words were tactful, he was still saying that the demon empress was meddling in other people's business. How could the demon empress not be angry? Moreover, the process of the real and fake heavenly emperors was too mysterious. Everyone was deceived. The demon empress really thought that the Xie Dan Qiong there was still the real Xie Dan Qiong. Now that she wanted to use this as a pretext to make a fuss, Zhuang Xiaoqin's words gave the demon empress an excuse. She had a reason to be angry. Chapter 2401. Although Zhuang Xiaoqin and the rest were already the top experts in the world, they were still nothing in the eyes of the demon empress. If they really fought, even if the four of them attacked together, they could only contend with the demon empress for a while. It was impossible for them to escape the fate of defeat. Both sides were at odds, and the demon empress was about to attack Zhuang Xiaoqin and the rest. At this moment, Extreme Heaven Merciless Heavenly Emperor Zhu Wuqing stood up and said, "Your Majesty Demon Empress, please calm down for now." The appearance of these four people is indeed a little abrupt. However, Zhuang Xiaoqin's statement is also somewhat reasonable. If a heavenly emperor can't deter the world with his true ability, how can he stand side by side with you and me and be known as the emperor and empress? Besides, these four people are still from Mo Yuntian. Previously, they participated in the competition for the position of heavenly emperor. It's reasonable for them to ask for the position of heavenly emperor today. Taking 10,000 steps back, this is indeed a family matter of Mo Yuntian. Donghuang Shui Leihan, at the side, sneered and interrupted. Does this mean that the Extreme Heaven Emperor thinks that this method is reasonable? Speaking of which, I'm originally from the Extreme Heaven. If one day I rush to the Extreme Heaven and kill your entire family, will it only be a family matter of the Extreme Heaven? I don't think you'll blame the Eastern Royal Heaven for it, right? Long Yinghuan, the Blazing Sun Celestial Emperor of the Crimson North Immortal Realms, spoke. Your Majesty, Donghuang's words are wrong. There's a suspicion that you are overstating things. Your Majesty, Donghuang's origin is no longer important. What's important is that you are now the overlord of the Eastern Royal Immortal Realms. Your every action and action is inseparable from the Eastern Royal Immortal Realms. Shui Leihan couldn't help but laugh out loud. Long Yinghuan, are you saying that if a person achieves something outside of his hometown, he will no longer be considered as a native of his hometown? What kind of bullshit are you spouting? If you, Long Yinghuan, become a dog in my Eastern Royal Heaven, are you saying that you're just a dog when you return to your hometown? Long Yinghuan was furious and said coldly, Shui Leihan, how dare you speak so rudely? Are you really going to go against me no matter what? Shui Leihan raised his head and sneered. Go against you? Are you worthy? What's more, each and every one of you is opposing Mo Yuntian. This emperor just doesn't like the look of it. To think that I'm purposely opposing you. Heavenly Emperor Yan Yang, other than being good at distorting the truth, you're also very good at sticking gold on your face. What's wrong? Are you trying to make use of my Donghuang's reputation to raise your status? He snorted coldly and said, It's a pity that no matter how much you improve, you're still as despicable. Long Yinghuan was so angry that his hands and feet were trembling. He said furiously, Shui Leihan, in the history of heavenly emperors ascending the throne, which one of them didn't go through all kinds of hardships and dangers? Which one of them hadn't narrowly escaped death? Who else could have ascended the throne so peacefully and smoothly? You're speaking empty words and acting recklessly. What's more, you're being unreasonable by attacking me. What are your intentions? The Celestial Emperor's ascension ceremony is not over yet. It is only natural that someone would challenge the Celestial Emperor's strength. Without sufficient strength, it was difficult for him to accept the masses. How could he become the Celestial Emperor? Long Yinghuan loudly said, This is a rule that has been around for thousands of years. Who can break it? How can the Jade Flower Great Emperor be an exception? The Everlasting Emperor of the Daluo Heaven, Zi Wuji, smiled faintly and said, Heavenly Emperor Yan Yang is right. These are indeed the rules of the heavens. But I want to ask these few local challengers of the ink cloud sky. When the heavenly limit was still around, what were the few of you doing? When the Jade Flower Great Emperor was fighting against the extraterrestrial demons, where were you? Who was the one who quelled the extraterrestrial demons, and who was the one who brought the turbulent ink cloud sky back on the right track? Now that all the dangers are over, you jump out to pick the fruits of the labor and accuse the great benefactor of the entire ink cloud sky of not being qualified. Do you think you're right? The South Pole Heavenly Emperor of Ice and Snow, Meng Jing, replied, Brother Z, you're wrong. Back then, Yuan Tianji didn't give himself away. It was only the Jade Flower Great Emperor who had the foresight. When Yuan Tianji exposed his extraterrestrial demon true body, it was also the time when he disappeared. These 4 people weren't nearby, how could they have arrived in time? Not to mention participating in the battle? Brother Z's statement, I'm afraid it's a little nitpicking. Buter Heavenly Emperor Mo Huichen said indifferently, no matter what, it's an indisputable fact that these people didn't participate in the battle against the extraterrestrial demons. At this moment, facing the great benefactor of the entire ink cloud sky, they spoke rudely and rashly challenged him. This point is even more undeniable. Big Western Sky's Mad Sword Heavenly Emperor Wu Yaquang said, even if these people's actions are more or less in the wrong, but what they're doing now is actually following the past practice of the Heaven Imperial Court. This point can't be overturned in the end. Even that year, His Majesty the Sage Monarch had also specially talked about this kind of matter. The Heaven Imperial Court is originally a world where the strong are respected. If you want to find people with noble morals, there are many great scholars in this world. But those people lack the strength to truss up a chicken. How can they manage one side of the world? Protect the peace of one side. Green Sky Heaven's Wei Heavenly Emperor Mo Qingqing said coldly, according to Brother Wu's meaning, Xie Danqiong, the great benefactor of the entire ink cloud sky, being killed by ink cloud sky on the spot at the most glorious moment of his life is also a matter of course, isn't it? I can only scoff at this kind of statement. I really don't dare to agree. DE and Empress opened their mouths to speak, and those with discerning eyes could see it. DE and Empress, this world's highest echelon, finally formed 2 distinct factions at this moment. One faction was led by Donghuang Shui Leihan and Demon Empress Yao X, fully supporting Ink Cloud Sky's Jade Flower Heavenly Emperor. There was also Buter Heavenly Emperor Mo Huichen and Daluo Heavenly Emperor Ziwuji, also obviously standing on Shui Leihan's side. As for the other side, it was led by Merciless Heavenly Emperor Zui Wuqing, Flaming Sun Heavenly Emperor Long Yinghuan, Mad Sword Heavenly Emperor Wu Yaquang forming a faction. Whereas South Pole Sky's Ice and Snow Heavenly Emperor Meng Jinghui's stance was a little ambiguous, leaning more towards Heavenly Emperor Wu Qing's side. Green Sky's Heavenly Emperor Mo Qingqing, on the other hand, was slightly leaning towards Shui Leihan's side. But to be fair, these 2 people's stances were basically still the same, not leaning more towards any side. The 2 factions were tit for tat. In terms of strength, Shui Leihan and Demon Empress's faction could be said to completely crush the other party, but in terms of background, the other party still had Sage Lord Yunshangren's support. If this was the case, the 2 sides could be considered to be evenly matched, roughly on par, and no side could have the absolute upper hand. Among the millions of people below, there was someone who sneered, "What's there to debate about? Why don't we just let them go up and fight? The winner will be king, then wouldn't everything be fine?" Jade Flower Heavenly Emperor's might is awe-inspiring in the ink cloud sky. It can't be that he doesn't dare to accept my challenge, right? Although this person's voice wasn't loud, it spread throughout the entire place. Obviously, there was someone who was adding fuel to the fire. For a moment, there were people from all directions who started to clamor because of this, saying one after another, "Yes, yes, the strong will be respected, the winner will be king." There were even people who stood out and raised their arms, shouting, "Fight! Fight! Fight! Let me, the Jade Flower Great Emperor, teach these clowns a lesson." The strong will be respected, the winner will be king. The strong will be respected, the winner will be king. I, Heavenly Emperor Mo Yun, have never been afraid of challenges. That's right, If you don't prove your strength, how can you be the ruler of a part of the world? These people were jeering from all directions, and some people who didn't know the truth also started to chime in. In an instant, there was an uproar. Mo Tianji, who was at the side, closed his eyes as if he didn't hear it, but the divine senses that spread out remembered each and every one of these people who started to cause trouble. If one of them dies a good death, I won't be able to continue living anymore. The master of calculation and manipulation was really angry. What Mo Tianji couldn't understand the most was that Xie Dan Qiong had clearly saved Mo Yuntian, and this was something that everyone in Mo Yuntian, from the elderly to the children, knew. But when someone instigated trouble, these people actually followed blindly without thinking. In fact, they were really interested in watching their savior fight a bloody battle against a strong enemy, even if there was the danger of losing their lives. They weren't worried at all. The deep-rooted bad habits of humans. Mo Tianji's eyes became colder and colder, and there was even a feeling of disgust rising. Zhi Wuqing, the heavenly emperor of merciless heaven, smiled coldly and looked at Xue Leihan without giving in at all. He said lightly, "Before I came here, His Majesty the Saint Monarch had specially instructed, the imperial court has laws, and the martial world has limits. The laws can't be abolished, and the speed can't be exceeded. Everything must be done according to the original rules, and no mistakes can be made." Xue Leihan's pupils shrank, and he said indifferently, "You mean, you're using Cloud Master to pressure me?" Heavenly Emperor Wuqing smiled. "I didn't mean that. I'm just repeating His Majesty the Saint Monarch's words. It's just that, whether it's reasonable or not, if Jade Flower Emperor doesn't dare to accept the challenge of these people in front of the heroes of the world, then even if you become the Heavenly Emperor in the end, what's the point? What dignity is there left?" Zui Wuqing's words really hit the nail on the head. Yes, whether it was right or not, whether it was reasonable or not, but Xie Dan Qiong was indeed in a difficult position now. In front of tens of millions of people, if they were to cower in fear and avoid battle, all of their dignity and face would be gone. Now that things had come to this, no matter how they argued, this battle was destined to be unavoidable. At this moment, Jade Flower Emperor, who was standing in front of the first step, slowly turned around. His handsome face was full of seriousness, and he said in a deep voice, "It's indeed useless to say more. Since I want to ascend to that position, there are some challenges that I have to face. If you want to fight, I'll fight. However, swords have no eyes. If you die in my hands because of this, don't regret it. People have to pay the price for their own actions. The path of life and death is nothing more than one in front and one behind. Take a step forward, and there's a mountain of swords and a sea of fire. Take a step back, and there's a vast sea and sky." This Jade Flower Emperor said coldly, "Challengers, you'd better be prepared to die first." In this sentence, the murderous intent was already naked and no longer concealed. It showed that once they started fighting, it would be a situation where they would fight to the death. There was no such thing as a competition between the strong and the weak. There was only life and death. Chapter 2402. He was dead drunk yesterday, but very happy. His friends came to congratulate him on moving to a new place. The drinking session was simply heartwarming. 42 people. After excluding the women and children, there were 33 people left. 33 men finished 25 bottles of white wine. Cough, 40% white wine. They all collapsed. Excerpt a few excerpts for everyone. Excerpt of the phone call after they arrived at the hotel. "Captain, damn it, why aren't you here yet? Did you die on the way?" "Comrade, damn it, I'm running, who the hell are you?" "Captain, damn you." "Comrade, then damn you?" "Captain, I'm your second uncle." "Comrade, second uncle is also an uncle." "Who the hell are you?" "Captain, why do you care who I am?" "Damn it, it's not even 3 minutes." "Comrade, damn it, wait, we're here? That table? At the table at the beginning." One guy said, "I have fatty liver, I can't drink." Another immediately showed his medical record. "Look, I have heart disease, I'll drink." "Fatty liver is nothing," another said. "I drove here." Immediately, everyone at the table jeered, "Damn it, you think we can't afford a car?" Another guy said, "I didn't drink at my wedding, I can't drink." Everyone at the table shouted, "You don't need to drink at your wedding, you just need to do something else." Immediately, someone joked, "Do what else?" A comrade secretly got married during a vacation without informing anyone. He came today and suffered a lot. One guy said, "Damn it, the groom is here. Who the hell is this? He looks like a dog." Another said, "Damn it, you don't even know the groom. Didn't you drink at the wedding?" This guy continued, "Whoever drinks at the wedding is a bastard." Everyone at the table jeered, Who went to the wedding? Damn it, come out and let us see this bastard." So everyone shook their heads, "He didn't go." Then they all fired, "Damn it, he didn't invite us to the wedding?" Then everyone began to ask, "What does the bride look like? Is she fair? Is she fat? Does she feel good? Is she good? Damn it, can you be more specific with your words? Is she good? Call them over and strip them naked so that we can check them out." In the end, the bridegroom kept bowing and begging, but was not forgiven. He had no choice but to drink a bottle of wine as an apology. He collapsed before the banquet even started. That comrade in Jinan, the one who lent me money to buy a house, was attacked as soon as he arrived. Everyone at the table was from Laiwu. He was the only one from Jinan. Therefore, everyone roared together, "Let's kill this Jinan man first." After 2 rounds, this guy collapsed under the table. "This morning, I was sleeping when a friend called me. Bro, I remember that you moved yesterday. Did I go? I was confused on the spot. This brat got drunk last night and did a lot of goose-stepping in the hotel. She actually doesn't remember anything. So I said, 'You didn't come?' He apologized profusely. 'Brother, I'm really sorry. I drank too much last night and couldn't make it. I'll make it up to you in the afternoon.' This feels so good. The word count is limited, and it's almost 1,000 words. So, also, just to make it clear, soldiers are like this when they're together. Full of vulgarities. If you don't like it, you can ignore it. Please forgive me." Chapter 2403. The 4 of them laughed at the same time. Qianghua is really bold. However, we have been roaming the world for millions of years and have already seen through life and death. It would be a real pity if we accidentally hurt Brother Xie. They didn't address Xie Danqiong as Emperor Qianghua, but called him Brother Xie. Obviously, they didn't acknowledge Xie Danqiong's identity and status as the Heaven Emperor. Xie Danqiong's eyes flashed with murderous intent. With his hands behind his back, he said calmly, "Don't regret your words." Zue Wuqing, the heavenly Emperor Wu Qing, said at the right time, "Before I came, His Majesty had solemnly instructed that although Chu Wuliang and the others' feelings were understandable, their actions were a little extreme. However, it's fine for everyone to compete, but we mustn't damage the harmony between us, and we mustn't fight to the death either. After all, the heavenly demons are running rampant now, and their desire to destroy the heavenly imperial court has yet to die. We have to conserve every bit of our combat strength, and be prepared to fight the heavenly demons at any time, and quell the heavenly demon threat." Long Yinghuan said emotionally, "His Majesty is really far-sighted and far-sighted. It's so touching." Donghuang Shueleihan sneered and said sarcastically, "Far-sighted? Far-sighted? Why didn't I see it?" Although everyone can say beautiful words, just based on someone's pretentiousness, it really makes my teeth ache. I've only heard these 2 sentences, and it's already enough to make me lose my appetite. I'm really fucking unlucky. Why did I forget to look at the almanac when I went out today? Especially when I'm dealing with trash like you, how can I forget to look at the almanac? This is this emperor's mistake." Zue Wuqing said coldly, "Shueleihan, are you looking down on His Majesty's decision? Or are you questioning His Majesty's decision? Or are you objecting to His Majesty's decision?" Demon Empress Yao Exeter said coldly, "Look down? Decision? What's there to talk about? Since when did he look up to him? Besides, it's not just His Majesty the Donghuang who feels this way. Even this Empress has lost her appetite after hearing this. Speaking of which, this empress has looked at the almanac today. Although everything is going well today, with Yuri's promotion, this empress has to be wary of villains. However, villains are hard to find, but fake emperors are everywhere. However, only a fake emperor in the world who can do this can truly reach the peak and succeed in everything. For example, His Majesty the Sage Monarch is like this. Zue Wuqing's pupils contracted. Your Majesty, your words are like the wind. It's too late for regrets. There are some words that you have to bear with the consequences. Yao Exeher sneered, consequences? What consequences? Is there anything in this heaven imperial court that I, Yao Exeher, cannot bear? She said coldly, from what you said earlier, I can hear another layer of meaning. The Saint Lord actually knew beforehand that someone would come to challenge him, and even miraculously knew who the challenger was. Such a prophetic ability is indeed not something my generation can match. Since young, I admit that I am not as good as him. It's just that as the ruler of the imperial court, not only did he not take the initiative to calm things down, he even added fuel to the fire from behind. In such a situation where it is impossible to get off the tiger, he actually said that the bigger picture is more important? What big picture? Did he see the big picture? It's simply laughable to the extreme. Dong Huang Shui Leihan said mockingly, as the saying goes, one has to erect a chastity memorial arch after committing adultery, isn't it referring to this bastard? After a pause, she added another word, egg. He originally just wanted to say, bastard, but then he remembered that his sister was the Saint Lord's wife. Saying that the Saint Lord was a bastard was equivalent to saying that his sister was having an affair. He felt that it was inappropriate, so he added the word egg. Heavenly Emperor Wuqing's face swelled. He knew that he had said something wrong, but he was speechless for a long time. At such a time, any explanation would be useless. At this moment, Chu Wuliang had already turned into a long rainbow. He took the lead and rushed up to the sky. Standing in the void, he turned into a golden figure that was emitting brilliant golden light. He said sternly, Xie Danqiong, come up. In front of the heroes of the world, show the means that you have to become the heavenly emperor of Ink Cloud. Xie Danqiong floated up slowly. His figure was tall and straight, and his clothes were fluttering. He flew up to the sky and stood in front of Chu Wuliang. He said indifferently, Chu Wuliang, you have also lived for a long time. You should know that the so-called life and death are sometimes really simple. If you are alive, you can continue to enjoy life and continue to command the world. But if you die, then no matter what you were called when you were alive, you will only have one name after death, and that is, corpse. The next moment, Xie Danqiong continued very seriously, I sincerely hope that you can consider carefully. Chu Wuliang laughed strangely and said, does Jade Flower Great Emperor mean that you will kill me? Do you have the confidence to kill me? These words were obviously meant to provoke him. Xie Danqiong had a sincere look of pity on his face. He didn't evade and said softly, killing you is like killing a chicken. It's not worth mentioning at all. Chu Wuliang was so angry that he laughed and said, in that case, Brother Xie, please take the trouble to send me off. As he spoke, this great deer mountain king already held his sword in his hand. The long sword flashed in the air, and a sword light suddenly shot out. It was as round as a pillar and as long as 1,000 feet. This sword aura was extremely magnificent. It didn't slash at Xie Danqiong, but at the void. Everyone who saw this scene was dazzled. It was really a show of strength to gain the upper hand. Xie Danqiong stood with his hands clasped behind his back. There was still a faint smile on his face, and his expression didn't change. It was as if he didn't see that shocking sword. Xie Danqiong, you said it yourself. You can't complain when you send me off in the netherworld. Chu Wuliang obviously knew the importance of this great Emperor Qianghua in Mo Yuntian. He confirmed it again in front of everyone, so as not to arouse public anger. However, his action also exposed his killing intent. It was obvious that he had made up his mind not to let Xie Danqiong live. Xie Danqiong was still calm. He said softly, come on, don't miss the time. Chu Wuliang let out a long and loud cry. His voice shook the entire area. Everyone's heart tightened. They saw an even more splendid and magnificent light rise from his hand. Then he brandished his sword, and it turned into a gigantic tiger. Its entire body was gorgeous and resplendent. Then it pounced toward Xie Danqiong. Tiger-killing sword. The knowledgeable people were all shocked. This sword was driven by pure spiritual energy. It condensed all the energy into essence. Once the sword was launched, it had the power of a tiger king that could swallow the sky and the earth. It was said that a tiger king could swallow the sky and the earth. Ordinary tiger kings of the demon clans didn't have the qualification to be crowned as kings if they couldn't reach such a level. Chu Wuliang's sword was to kill the enemy. Secondly, it was to intimidate the crowd. Thirdly, it was to show his strength. In other words, he had reached the qualification to be a king. He was qualified to be the Heaven Emperor. This was the meaning behind it. That giant tiger, which was 1,000 feet tall, shook its head and wagged its tail. Countless sword lights came roaring from it. Xie Danqiong had already changed his appearance and reappeared beside Chu Yang. But his complexion changed in an instant. I would have made a fool of myself on the spot if I had been the one on the stage. Even if I don't lose in one move, it's only a matter of time. This was the difference in the level of one's foundation. It had nothing to do with talent or hard work. There was no way around it. However, Xie Danqiong was still standing in the sky like a mountain. His upper body didn't move, and his lower body didn't move. He didn't dodge at all. There was still a confident smile on his face. He turned his wrist, and a white viburnum flower appeared in his hand. He slowly recited, "Viburnum flowers bloom, hundreds of flowers wither. Dark clouds compete in the sky." With a long cry, the pure and holy jasper flowers spun and flew out. The moment it left his finger, it was clearly just a jasper flower, but as it left his finger, it quickly split into 2, then 4, then 8. In the blink of an eye, the entire sky was filled with jasper flowers, dazzling everyone's eyes. At this moment, countless beautiful flowers bloomed in the sky at the same time. It was really beautiful. Everyone was dazzled at this moment. They almost lost their minds in the face of such a magnificent scene. The sea of viburnum flowers blotted out the sky and the sun. Naturally, they also drowned the giant tiger at the same time. New viburnum flowers bloomed continuously. Layer by layer, they seemed to be blooming continuously until the end of the world, and they seemed to be blooming in everyone's heart. However, this boundless beauty also contained boundless murderous intent. Everyone realized at this moment that when the viburnum flowers bloomed to the peak, it was time for the murderous intent to appear. The viburnum flower emperor didn't hide her murderous intent at all. Even in the face of St. June's warning, she still insisted on doing it. It was a sure kill situation. In the sky, the viburnum flower emperor's long recitation continued. Blooming for a lifetime, no one knows. Today, I've reached the peak. Xie Danqiong was also dazzled by the scene in front of him. He sighed and said, "The viburnum flowers can bloom to such an extent. This is really a realm that I've never dreamed of. This life has an end, and the future is endless. It turns out that my previous path is so wonderful." The next moment, an extremely shrill scream came out. In the sky, the great deer mountain king Chu Wuliang turned into a long rainbow and flew out quickly. However, no matter how hard he tried to dodge in the sky, he couldn't escape the pursuit of the viburnum flowers. The tiger-slaying sword had already been broken into pieces. Facing such a shocking move, the great deer mountain king Chu Wuliang was scared out of his wits and tried to escape. However, the sea of viburnum flowers filled every inch of space that he could escape from. He had never dreamed that the viburnum flower emperor, who was reported to be only at the level of a saint, could unleash such a powerful force that could kill him. The long rainbow was blocked by the rolling viburnum flowers. It dashed left and right and gradually scattered. However, the viburnum flowers were still blooming. They were still boundless and omnipresent. Finally, the viburnum flower emperor chuckled and said indifferently, "You didn't show up to kill the demon, but now you're quite active in the fight for fame and fortune. What's the point of keeping such a person alive? Just watch me kill him, to eliminate the internal conflict. Suddenly, the world became clear and empty. Something unexpected happened today. In the afternoon, I received a call and got off the plane with the people from the game company in Jinan. I hurriedly picked up my brothers and asked them to have dinner together. When they arrived at the hotel, it was already 10:30 p.m. I came back to write quickly, "I'm sorry for the late update. I'm even more sorry for only updating one chapter. But, please believe me. I'm really exhausted. I don't know if you can understand. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.